Chapter 1335. Kaboom! In the air, the black flame blades bombarded the ice shield. A loud explosion sounded, and a glaring crack appeared on the ice shield. The Snow Empress was inside the shield, but she still felt the huge impact. Her body trembled slightly, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. The ice shield formed by the seventh seal, the ice-sealing seal, was cracked by Nye Tian's attack. Nye Tian's attack power was shocking. Shueling Tian, prepare to die. Nye Tian stood in midair, and the meteor wings behind him suddenly enlarged. When fully extended, they were thousands of meters long. Terrifying black flames surged on them, and they looked extremely strange and frightening. Lumo, too, and the others looked at Nye Tian in the sky with strange expressions, as if they were looking at a monster. Boom! 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 As soon as Nye Tian's voice fell, another 3 black flame blades appeared. They were like sharp arrows that shot towards the Snow Empress. Crack! 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 The black flame blades were extremely fast. They bombarded the ice shield, and another 3 glaring cracks appeared. The Snow Empress' body trembled uncontrollably, and she spat out blood continuously. At this moment, she looked at Nye Tian with a look of fear and dread. For the first time, she felt a genuine murderous intent, as if death was about to descend. The seventh seal, the ice-sealing seal, is indeed a little tricky. Nye Tian looked at the Snow Empress, and his lips curled into a cold smile. He said mockingly, "I want to see how long the ice-sealing seal can last." As soon as he finished speaking, his wings shook, and countless black flame blades appeared in the air. They were like arrows that filled the sky, and they came crashing down. Bang, bang, bang. Amidst the muffled sounds, the ice shield was on the verge of collapse, as if it would completely collapse at any moment. The seventh seal was indeed terrifying, but it could not withstand Nye Tian's concentrated attacks. If this continued, it would not be long before the seventh seal completely collapsed, and that would be the Snow Empress' end. The Snow Empress' face was as pale as a sheet, and her eyes flickered intensely. The fear in her heart was magnified limitlessly through her eyes. Never in his wildest dreams did he imagine that one day he would be used as a live target by others. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. The Snow Empress was like a piece of fat meat on a chopping board, and she was at the mercy of Nye Tian. She couldn't retaliate at all. "Snow Empress, it's time to end this." At this time, Nye Tian's cold voice sounded, and his body released extremely surging black flames of nothingness, perfectly fusing with the power of the stars. "Starfire burning sea." As he growled, Nye Tian struck out with his palm, and a line of fire whizzed out, following which it formed a sea of fire that pressed down on the Snow Empress. No! The Snow Empress realized that something was amiss. She howled tragically, but it was too late. Terrifying waves of fire roared out, like a ferocious beast that could devour everything. There was a violent explosion in the void, and the frosty chaos formed by the ice-sealed demon seal suddenly collapsed. At this moment, the Snow Empress felt death approaching. The waves of black flames that were pressing down on her were like death knells that whistled in her ears. The Snow Empress is going to die. Lamengtu and the others watched the scene in front of them, and their hearts trembled violently. No one had expected that the Snow Empress, one of the 9 emperors, would end in such a manner. However, right at the critical moment, an unexpected event occurred. "Don't hurt him!" A cold voice suddenly sounded in the void. It was extremely cold and did not contain any emotion, as if a god had given a divine decree. "Lord Adjudicator!" The Snow Empress cried out in surprise when she heard this voice. She was ecstatic. "Adjudicator?" Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, but his hands did not stop. Instead, they pressed down even more wildly. He knew that the Adjudicator would appear, but he did not expect him to appear at this time. Since he had already attacked, there was no need to stop. The Adjudicator wanted to protect the Snow Empress' life, but Nye Tian wanted to kill her. A surprised voice sounded in the void. The person who had come did not expect Nye Tian to completely ignore his warning. Brat, ignoring the adjudicator is a huge taboo. The cold voice rang out once again, and the void shook violently. Following which, a huge palm appeared and grabbed the Snow Empress from the black flames. Nietian was stunned by the scene in front of him, and his eyes trembled. The adjudicator was indeed a godly state cultivator. He actually had such extraordinary methods to save the Snow Empress from the brink of death. When the others saw this, they also froze on the spot, unable to react for a long time. In the next moment, a figure descended majestically. He was not tall, but his aura was like the mountains and the seas, and the heavens and earth seemed small in front of him. This is the legendary adjudicator. Nietian suddenly raised his head and looked straight at the person who had come. Although his eyes were flickering, he did not evade at all. Lord! At this time, the Frost Thearch and the great Emperor of Ziwei reacted and spoke in unison, bowing respectfully. It was obvious that the 9 Thearchs knew the person in front of them. This was the adjudicator they spoke of. The adjudicator ignored the Frost Thearch and the others, but his eyes were looking at Nietian. When he saw the latter's eyes clearly, his face could not help but sink, and he said in his heart, "This brat's eyes are so cold, and he is actually not afraid of me." It's a little strange. Generally speaking, when a cultivator below the godly state encountered a godly state cultivator, they would not dare to look him in the eye. Just the pressure from the aura alone was unbearable. However, Nietian completely ignored the adjudicator's aura, which was really a little strange. At this time, the adjudicator seemed to notice something. He looked down at his arm, and it was actually slightly charred, causing his expression to change involuntarily, and he directly exclaimed, "The heart of nothingness." When the adjudicator was saving the Snow Empress just now, one of his arms directly reached into the black flames of nothingness, and he was actually injured. A Heavenly Emperor realm cultivator could actually injure him. This made the adjudicator feel incredulous. "You integrated with the heart of nothingness?" The adjudicator was stunned, looking at Nietian with a burning gaze as he asked in surprise. The adjudicator naturally knew what the heart of nothingness was, but he clearly did not expect that a Heavenly Emperor realm cultivator could actually integrate with the heart of nothingness. "So what if I am?" Nietianling responded coldly, not showing the slightest reverence because of the other party's identity and strength. What he advocated was that everyone was equal. Whether it was a godly state cultivator or an ordinary person, in his eyes, they were all the same. There was no difference. And the adjudicator's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not expect Nietian's attitude to be so cold. He then sneered and said, "Brat, you still don't know who this seed is, right? I don't know who you are, and I have no interest in knowing." Nietian looked at the adjudicator, his eyes flashing with a cold intent, and said, "But I must kill the people around you." "Must kill." The adjudicator was taken aback again, and then his face became very gloomy. Nietian's attitude had aroused his dissatisfaction. However, he seemed to be very interested in Nietian's talent, so he suppressed the anger in his heart and wanted to say something. "My lord, this person killed the Illusion Sovereign, Day-Night Emperor, and Alchemy Emperor." Suddenly, the Snow Empress spoke, her eyes vicious. Chapter 1336. Originally, the adjudicator admired Nietian's talent very much, but when he heard the Snow Empress' words, his face suddenly turned cold. Nietian had killed the 9 emperors, which was a taboo. This was something that could not be forgiven. The Snow Empress was indeed shameless, directly pushing the Illusion Emperor's death to Nietian. Lord Illusion Emperor is not." At this moment, the Frost Empress reacted and hurriedly tried to explain for Nietian. "Shut up." Without waiting for the Frost Empress to finish, the adjudicator directly interrupted her. His cold eyes locked on Nietian, and he said in a deep voice, "Brat, did you really kill the 9 emperors?" "So what if I did?" Nietianling replied coldly, not bothering to explain or argue. He knew that even if he tried to defend himself, this adjudicator would not listen to him. Moreover, he had indeed killed Emperor Day-Night and the Dan Emperor. Just these two alone were enough for the adjudicator to sentence him to death. "Brat, you are too insolent." The adjudicator's deep voice exploded like thunder. The 9 emperors are the people appointed by the adjudicator to rule the heaven realm. How can you kill them? So what if they are appointed by the adjudicator? Nyetian already knew that the adjudicator would say this. So he said in a cold voice, "If the 9 emperors want to kill me, should I just stand there and let them kill me? The 9 emperors are also human, and they will also make mistakes. If they do something wrong, they will have to pay the price." "Brat." The adjudicator's eyes became gloomy, and he said, "If the 9 emperors do something wrong, it is not your turn to make a move. You are not qualified to kill them." The adjudicator had never thought that he would actually meet such an insolent person when he came to the heaven realm, completely not putting him in his eyes. "Whether I am qualified or not, it is not up to you to decide." Nyetian stared straight at the adjudicator and said, "In my eyes, no matter who it is, as long as they offend me, I can kill them. Be it the 9 emperors or the adjudicator, they are no different from anyone else." "Brat, you're courting death." When the adjudicator heard Nyetian comparing him to other people, he immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. His aura surged, forming a frightening pressure that came crashing down on Nyetian. Nyetian's brows knit together slightly, yet he remained fearless, and a sword aura that shot into the sky surged around him. Rumble. In the void, a loud sound was heard. The two forces collided in the air, shaking the heavens and the earth. The space trembled. Nyetian's figure trembled slightly, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back while a wisp of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. A god realm martial artist was indeed terrifying. Their aura was unimaginably strong. Even though Nyetian had fused with the heart of nothingness, he was still unable to contend against an adjudicator. Nyetian's abilities had already far surpassed the Snow Empress, but he was still a far cry from the adjudicator. And, after repelling Nyetian, what flashed in the adjudicator's eyes was not elation, but greater shock. The aura pressure just now, he already went all out, and it actually directly forced Nyetian back. This was simply something unimaginable. He was a deity realm martial artist, while Nyetian was a heavenly emperor realm martial artist. There was a qualitative difference between the two. Deity realm martial artists, those were people who condensed a divine spark within their bodies, capable of contending with heaven and earth. Divine spark was the symbol of a deity realm martial artist, and it was even something even more terrifying than a primordial spirit. Want to kill a deity realm martial artist? One must destroy their divine spark. Nyetian did not have a divine spark. How could he contend head-on with a deity realm martial artist? The adjudicator's brows furrowed, his expression becoming appalled. He had lived for several tens of thousands of years, and it was his first time seeing such a terrifying heavenly emperor realm martial artist. It was inconceivable. The others were also stunned on the spot. They all did not think that Nyetian's strength was actually so terrifying. "Brat, who exactly are you?" The adjudicator's gaze slightly calmed down, and he spoke in a deep voice, actually with a trace of fear. "I am called Nyetian," Nyetianling replied coldly. "Nya." Hearing Nyetian's name, the adjudicator was slightly stunned, as if he was very interested in his surname, and even a little nervous. "Are you from the heaven domain?" The adjudicator calmed down after a long time, and continued to ask. "Yes," Nyetian replied. The adjudicator frowned, and his expression seemed to relax a little. He murmured in his heart, "If he is from the heaven domain, even if his surname is Nya, he must be an unimportant person. I'm going to kill the people around you now. Please step aside." At this time, Nyetianling spoke coldly. He did not give up on killing the Snow Emperor just because the adjudicator came. Today, he must kill the Snow Emperor. "My lord, this person killed the Illusion Emperor and the others. We must not let him go." The Snow Emperor's gaze tensed up, and his expression became obviously nervous as he said anxiously, "Kid, your talent is not bad, and you have a very good chance of entering the territory. But unfortunately, you killed the 9 emperors." As the adjudicator, This seat will not allow you to live." The adjudicator frowned, and his eyes released a cold, killing intent. "Then let's fight." Nietion did not explain anything, and he let out a deep roar, and his whole body was full of killing intent. This world was like this, and the strong had the absolute right to speak. Even if the 9 emperors made a mistake, they were not people that Nietion could kill. Seeing Nietion's aura, Lu Montu and the others were stunned, and they stared at the latter with wide eyes. Fighting with a god realm martial artist, Nietion was simply a madman. I want to see how strong a legendary god realm martial artist is. Nietion wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and his whole body was full of killing intent. "Conceited brat, today this seat will let you understand just how great the disparity between Heavenly Emperor realm martial artists and deity realm martial artists is." The adjudicator laughed coldly, his palm reaching out. A surging vortex actually appeared. In just an instant, the vortex rapidly expanded and spread in the void, enveloping the space within 10,000 meters. A layer of water flowed in the space, and it was extremely strange. What a terrifying aura! Nietion felt a mysterious power surging in the surroundings, and it was actually suppressing his yuan meridians. "Stinking brat, this seat is using God's domain. In this seat's domain, you can only obediently wait for death." The adjudicator sneered, and then he slapped out a palm, and a giant water snake appeared in the void, opened its giant mouth, and attacked Nietion. Nietion's eyes slightly narrowed, and he seemed to understand something. He guessed that the adjudicator in front of him was a water attribute martial artist. It seemed that God realm martial artists were also divided into attributes. In the god's domain, Nietion's yuan meridians were suppressed, but his 10th yuan meridian was not suppressed. Sinister earth kill. Nietion's eyes darkened, and he let out a low roar. His whole body released a huge amount of star energy, and he immediately used one of the 2 ultimate moves of the Starry Sky ancient martial technique, Sinister Earth Kill. Boom! The star energy surged out, and the void trembled slightly. A giant black snake appeared, and with a sinister roar, it directly rushed over. Boom! 2 giant snakes, one black and one white, collided with each other, causing the void to tremble. A terrifying power wreaked havoc, and then it disappeared in an instant, absorbed by the god's domain. The terrifying god's domain could not only suppress a martial artist's yuan meridians, but could also absorb all kinds of energy. However, at this moment, the adjudicator's eyes flashed violently, and his face was filled with astonishment. He could not understand it all. Nietion's yuan meridians were clearly suppressed, so how could he still release such a terrifying power? At this moment, he realized that the silver-haired martial artist in front of him was an extremely strange opponent. At this moment, the adjudicator saw Nietion as a real opponent. Chapter 1337. In the demonic devouring abyss, the adjudicator stood tall in the sky, his eyes cold and murderous. He did not expect Nietion's strength to be so strong, far beyond his expectations. The more it was like this, the more he wanted to kill Yifutian. Someone like Nietion, once he entered the territory, he would definitely be like a carp leaping through the dragon's gate. Nietion looked at the adjudicator in shock. He was shocked by the power of the heaven and earth crafty Tao. It could actually fight against a godly state martial artist head-on. This kid is too scary. He must not be allowed to live. The adjudicator thought to himself. The murderous intent in his eyes intensified. In the next moment, the adjudicator moved and flipped his palm, mobilizing the laws of heaven and earth. The momentum of heaven and earth changed, and a huge handprint appeared in the void, blasting towards Nietion. Nietion frowned slightly. He could feel that the power of this palm was even more terrifying than the previous one. Heavenly crafty final hit. Without hesitation, violent star power surged out of Nietion's body, and another giant black snake appeared and whizzed out. Kaboom! Once again, The void shook, and endless power raged, but was instantly absorbed by the god's domain. Netion's body trembled slightly, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face turned slightly pale. The power of a godly state martial artist was still powerful, and he could not contend with it now. Seeing that Netion was repelled, the adjudicator frowned slightly, and his face became even more gloomy. Netion was able to block 2 of his attacks, which was far beyond his expectations. The others were also stunned. If they did not know Netion's identity, they would have thought that this was a battle between 2 godly state martial artists. The Snow Emperor was frightened, and his face was as white as a sheet. At this moment, he realized that Netion's strength had far surpassed his, and could be said to be infinitely close to the godly state. It had only been a year since Netion had returned to the Heaven Realm. This kind of cultivation speed was shocking and made people's hair stand on end. If not for the adjudicator's timely arrival, the Snow Empress would have already become a corpse. "Brat, you've really angered this seat." The adjudicator frowned, his face dark and gloomy, and the killing intent in his eyes became even more obvious. He quickly flipped his palms, and the strange vortex appeared once again. It suddenly trembled, and a huge and boundless force burst out. A wave that was visible to the naked eye appeared in the air, and immediately after, it turned into a frightening wave of chi, rolling and pressing down on Netion. Boom! Billowing waves of chi violently swept over, as if wanting to devour everything. Netion sensed that something was amiss. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the absolute heaven slash appeared in his hand. His body released a violent blood chi, and he forcibly activated the sword's sealing forbidden array. Blood-colored runes appeared and revolved around Netion's body. The power of the forbidden formation instantly condensed, turning into a giant blood-colored sword that enveloped his body. The adjudicator couldn't help but frown when he saw this scene. He immediately understood that Netion was trying to use the sword formation to resist the pressure of the god's domain. At the moment, Netion's 9 primordial meridians were being suppressed. Only by using the sword formation to resist the pressure of the god's domain could he alleviate the pressure of his primordial meridians. Only then would he be able to unleash the power of the sovereign dragon vein to a greater extent. Boom! In the next moment, a huge wave of dragon chi surged out from behind Netion, and a scarlet golden sea of lightning appeared. A 3,000-meter-long scarlet golden dragon appeared, and its terrifying body was surrounded by violent black flames of nothingness. Not only had the heart of nothingness fused with the 10th primordial star stone, but it had also fused with the 9 dragon veins. Roar! The scarlet golden dragon appeared, and it roared at the sky. Its dragon might shook the world, shaking the earth. Dragon vein! The adjudicator's eyes suddenly trembled, and he exclaimed, "You actually have the dragon vein!" He clearly didn't expect that Netion not only had the heart of nothingness, but also the dragon vein. However, he was very puzzled. How could the heart of nothingness and the dragon vein coexist? With the heart of nothingness's devouring power, no dragon vein could resist. Of course, it was impossible for him to know that Netion still had the primordial star stone in his body, which could temporarily suppress the heart of nothingness's devouring power. Netion is too terrifying. Lamengtu and the rest retreated repeatedly, shocked by Netion's astonishing strength. The shock in their hearts was all revealed on their faces. Rumble! High up in the sky, the scarlet golden dragon's body tumbled, charging into the surging waves, causing the space to tremble. At this moment, Netion's strength was already peak 9th level Heavenly Emperor, and he could already unleash the terrifying power of the sovereign dragon vein. Right at this moment, the adjudicator's brows furrowed slightly. He actually felt a huge force assailing him, causing his body to involuntarily sway, and he actually took a step back. Impossible! A surging, angry roar sounded out. The adjudicator's face fell, and he actually pressed over with a palm once more. Raging waves immediately appeared in the air, roaring and roaring wildly. But when Yetion saw the situation, his brows did not furrow. A strange smile even surged at the corners of his mouth. He already knew at this time that so-called deity realm martial artists were not as terrifying as the legends said, and were not undefeatable. Thinking up to here, the pair of wings behind Yetion suddenly shook, his figure turning into a streak of black light and flying out, and he actually charged straight for the adjudicator. Yetion, what is he trying to do? When everyone saw this scene, their gazes trembled intensely, simply not daring to believe their eyes. Yetion charged toward the adjudicator. Could it be that he was going to kill the latter? Killing a deity realm martial artist? This was too crazy. Stinking brat. What do you want to do? When the adjudicator saw Yetion charge over recklessly, he actually cried out in shock, unable to conceal the nervousness in his voice. He never dreamed that he, a dignified deity realm martial artist, would actually be forced to this extent by a heavenly emperor martial artist. I want to see if deity realm martial artists are really as immortal as the legends say. Yetion's figure was like lightning, his eyes cold and murderous, and he actually arrived at a place only 100 meters away from the adjudicator. In an instant, his eyes flickered and absolute confinement was activated. An enormous spiritual deterrence whizzed out, shrouding the adjudicator. Feeling the spiritual deterrence, the adjudicator was stunned and immediately felt that something was wrong. He wanted to react, but it was already too late. In an instant, the adjudicator's divine sense trembled violently, and he fell into a daze. Good chance. The corner of Yetion's mouth twitched, and he shouted joyfully. The sword absolute heaven suddenly slashed down, and a mighty sword shadow erupted with a destructive power. He knew that the martial body of a deity realm martial artist must be very tyrannical, so he used the forbidden move, blood devouring the sky, for this slash. He must kill the adjudicator on the spot. The others were completely frightened by Yetion's shocking action, and their eyes trembled violently. Yetion was really a madman. He even dared to kill a deity realm martial artist. Boom! At this time, the blood-colored sword's shadow suddenly fell, and in the midst of a bloody light, the adjudicator's body directly exploded. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere, and not even bones were left. The scene that entered the eyes made everyone suck in a breath of cold air, directly stunned on the spot, and looked at the sky in disbelief. The adjudicator, a deity realm martial artist from the upper realms, was actually killed by Yetion with one slash. How is this possible? Chapter 1338. The voice of the adjudicator suddenly came from the void, but his figure could not be seen, which was extremely strange. He's not dead. Yetion's eyes narrowed. He could not help but tremble, and his face was filled with shock. He killed the adjudicator with a single strike, but the adjudicator turned into a splatter of blood in front of him. He was not dead. How is this possible? Yetion had a look of shock on his face. He activated his holographic divine runes and searched through the surrounding space. After a short while, he discovered a crystalline ball of light floating in the air. It was actually only the size of a thumb and was extremely inconspicuous in the dark clouds. What is this? Yetion looked at the ball of light and frowned. This was something left behind after the adjudicator's body was destroyed. It was extremely strange. The ball of light swam in the air, and there was actually an extremely powerful soul aura within it. That's the adjudicator's godhead. The Snow Empress suddenly exclaimed at this moment. Her voice was extremely shrill. Godhood, that ball of light, was definitely the legendary godhood. The Snow Empress had heard that one had to form a godhead in order to ascend to the godly state. In order to condense a godhead, one had to absorb the energy of the God realm space. Bright Spirit Force was a form of energy that surpassed the heaven and earth spiritual energy. The reason why the people of the divine realm and the heaven realm could not advance to the God realm was not because they were not talented enough, but because there was no Shun-Yi power in the heaven realm. This was just like the martial artists of the middle and lower planes. No matter how talented they were, it was almost impossible for them to break through the planar restrictions. Even if the martial artists of the heaven realm and the god realm had heaven-defying talent, without the spirit power, they would not be able to advance to the god realm. However, the Snow Empress also knew that absorbing divine power wasn't the only way to form Godhead. There was another way, and that was to plunder Godhead. Plundering godhoods was much easier than simply relying on absorbing the power of gods to condense godhoods. The average cultivator would need several thousand years to condense the Godhead by absorbing the bright spirit force. Genius cultivators would need several hundred years, and only a small number of monstrous geniuses could condense the Godhead within 100 years. Those who were able to condense a Godhead within a few decades were definitely monstrous geniuses. Compared to absorbing the bright spirit energy to condense the Godhead, plundering the Godhead was much more brutal and simple. For example, the Adjudicator's godhood had been destroyed, but his godhood was still there. If he wanted to rebuild his body, it would take several years. During this period of time, if someone could destroy the divine sense inside the Godhead and then fuse with the Godhead, they would be able to advance to the God realm. However, there is a huge drawback to plundering divine deity, and that is that your future cultivation will become very slow. After all, it is not your divine deity, and it is not the most suitable for your martial body. The Snow Empress' eyes revealed a burning look when she thought about snatching the divine essence. She became extremely greedy. The Adjudicator seemed to have sensed that the Snow Emperor was up to no good. He could not help but growl, "Schwelling Tian, what are you trying to do?" "My lord, The Snow Empress was stunned. Her forehead was full of sweat, and she was speechless. Even if he knew about the method of seizing godhoods, he would not dare to have any ideas about the Adjudicators. The Adjudicator had a powerful force backing him, and even if he really did possess the former's godhead, he would not be able to live long in the Realmverse. Godhood. At this moment, Niet Tian's eyes narrowed, and he could not help but laugh. He had also heard of godhoods, but he had never seen one before. So it was like this. The legendary godhood was actually a ball of light the size of a thumb. It was really unbelievable. Needless to say, Niet Tian's understanding of the godhood was still very shallow. The size of the godhood varied according to the strength of the martial artist. The Adjudicator was the lowest level lower celestial, and his godhood was only the size of a thumb. If he advanced to the middle celestial, his godhood would increase to the size of a fist, and if he advanced to the upper celestial, it would be the size of a head. Little brat, how can you release such a powerful spiritual attack? At this moment, the Adjudicator seemed to have calmed down a lot, and he spoke in a deep voice. The spiritual attack from Niet Tian was too terrifying. He could clearly feel a wave of divine intent power, a spiritual attribute divine intent power. Niet Tian was from the divine realm of the heaven realm. How could he have divine intent power? This was too strange. You don't need to know this. Niet Tian stared at the ball of light in the air, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a strange smile. Little brat, what are you trying to do? The Adjudicator sensed that something was wrong, and he shouted in panic. I really want to know what the legendary godhood is. Niet Tian smiled, and his silhouette flashed, flying towards the ball of light. The Adjudicator's physical body had been destroyed, and he had lost the ability to fight back. Niet Tian, of course, would not let him leave. Stop! At this moment, a low voice resounded in the sky, and the void trembled. A majestic figure descended, and a majestic aura engulfed everything. Niet Tian frowned. Feeling a majestic aura descend, his body couldn't help but tremble, and he was forced to retreat. Niet Tian's wings flapped, and his silhouette retreated a few thousand meters, avoiding the pressure of the incoming figure. In the next moment, a gray-robed figure descended, and his aura spread out like a towering mountain. Another Adjudicator. Niet Tian's eyes widened, and he looked slightly nervous. He didn't expect another Adjudicator to descend. Moreover, judging from the aura, this Adjudicator was much stronger than the previous one. Lord Zhao, The previous adjudicator shouted in pleasant surprise when he saw his savior. He was extremely excited. If this adjudicator had come a second later, his godhood would have fallen into Nietion's hands. Li Bo, what's going on? The adjudicator saw the ball of light in the air, and his expression darkened. So the first adjudicator's name was Li Bo, Lord Zhao. A few days ago, I received a message from Shui Lingtian saying that one of the 9 sovereigns was killed, so I came to investigate. Li Bo's godhood moved, and it fell into Zhao Zi's palm. He explained everything, and finally, he said, it's this brat, he killed the 9 sovereigns, and when he spoke up to there, he paused for a moment. He was clearly a little embarrassed as he said, moreover, you destroyed my physical body. Huh? After listening to Li Bo's narration, Zhao Zi's expression darkened. His gaze locked onto Nietion, and a complicated expression appeared on his face. If Nietion had only killed a few of the 9 sovereigns, or defeated the Snow Empress, it wouldn't have surprised him. However, Nietion had actually defeated Li Bo and even destroyed the latter's physical body. This was extremely terrifying. A heavenly emperor realm cultivator actually defeated a godly realm cultivator, and it was indeed strange. More importantly, Nietion was still so young. Lord, this brat's strength is very strange. Not only does he have the heart of nothingness, but he also has the dragon vein. At this time, Li Bo's voice sounded again, and it was filled with hatred. Heart of nothingness and dragon vein? Zhao Zi was stunned, and a look of astonishment appeared on his face. He muttered, how can these 2 things coexist? Chapter 1339. Inside the demonic devouring abyss, another adjudicator, Zhao Zi, arrived, instantly reversing the situation. Nietion furrowed his brows, and a complicated look appeared in his eyes. He could sense that Zhao Zi's strength was far above Li Bo's. The current him was definitely not Zhao Zi's match. Nietion's guess was right. Zhao Zi's strength was far above Li Bo's. Li Bo was only an early-stage low god, while Zhao Zi was an early-stage mid-god. There was an entire realm difference between the two. To put it bluntly, the current Zhao Zi could instantly kill Nietion. However, he did not do so. Instead, he looked at Nietion with a gloomy expression, as though he was thinking about something. Lord Zhao, this kid killed the 9 emperors. Even if his talent is heaven-defying, we cannot let him live. Li Bo could guess what Zhao Zi was thinking and said anxiously, shut up. Zhao Zi gave a low shout and rebuked angrily. A dignified deity realm martial artist actually had his physical body destroyed by a heavenly emperor martial artist, and you still have the face to clamor here? The ball of Godhead light froze for a moment. Clearly, it was scared out of its wits and dared not speak anymore. Zhao Zi looked at Nietion as his mind raced. Nietion killed the 9 emperors and destroyed Li Bo's body. That was nothing. It was precisely because of this that Nietion's terrifying talent was highlighted. If it were under normal circumstances, Zhao Zi would have killed Nietion without any hesitation. But now he had to think about something. The Crimson Lunar Divine Palace has been in decline for the past few years. Every subsidiary plane is in a state of decline, and the number of talents is dwindling. If this continues, I'm afraid it will fall out of the 12 shrines. Although this kid in front of me has done some things that are out of line, his talent is too shocking. It's something I've never seen before in my life. If he joins the Divine Palace and participates in the grand competition of the 12 shrines, it might be a pleasant surprise. Zhao Zi pondered. His cold eyes gradually turned gentle. Kid, do you know that you've made a grave mistake? Zhao Zi made up his mind and decided to rope Nietion into the Crimson Lunar Divine Palace. Will you kill me? Looking at Zhao Zi, Nietion vaguely guessed something and asked directly. He did not explain anything to Zhao Zi because he could tell that the latter did not care about the 9 emperors at all. That will depend on your performance. Zhao Zi laughed. Nietion was much smarter than he had imagined. He said directly, young man, as long as you follow me back to the god domain, I will guarantee your life. Moreover, I will let you join the Red Moon Divine Palace, one of the 12 divine palaces in the god domain. How about it? God's shocking realm. Hearing these 4 words, Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly. This was the first time he learned that the upper realms of the divine realm in the heaven world were called the God-shocking realms. It seemed that the person in front of him was from one of the 12 divine palaces, the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, and he had taken a fancy to his talent, so he wanted to recruit him. Nietion was slightly shocked. It turned out that the world of martial arts was much larger than he had imagined. The God-shocking realm was definitely not the only realm, because the Sword Elder had said that the realm he was in was called the God-sealing region. What benefits can I get by joining the Crimson Moon Divine Palace? After thinking for a while, Nietion smiled faintly. Taken aback, Zhao Zi asked, "You want benefits?" She hadn't expected Nietion to make such a straightforward request. He was deeply shocked by Nietion's calmness. If it was an ordinary martial artist, they would definitely be ecstatic to hear that they could enter the upper realms. Take the Snow Emperor, for example. If Zhao Zi allowed him to enter the realms, he would definitely be obedient and would not want any benefits at all. Zhao Zi looked at Nietion with a little more admiration in his eyes. He said, "You can become a God realm martial artist after entering the realms. If you join the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, your future will be limitless. With your talent, it is not impossible for you to stand at the peak of the realms in the future." Nietion smiled faintly. He raised his eyebrows and said, "What you said, I can do it even if I don't join the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. As for standing at the peak of the realms, it is too far away. I am more interested in the benefits." Huh? Zhao Zi's eyebrows furrowed as he was taken aback. He hadn't expected Nietion to have such an attitude. Then he laughed and said, "Tell me, little friend, what do you want?" Nietion's calmness exceeded Zhao Zi's expectations. "I have some friends who also want to enter the God-shocking realm and join the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Is that okay?" Nietion said with a faint smile. This, Zhao Zi was stunned. He did not expect Nietion to make such a request. He originally thought that Nietion would ask for some divine weapons or divine pills. He did not expect Nietion to be thinking of his friends. "Rest assured, Lord Zhao, my friends are all peak stage heavenly emperors. Their strength is not weaker than the 9 emperors," Nietion said. He knew what Zhao Zi was worried about. "All right." Zhao Zi nodded and said, "I agree." He was an outer sect elder of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. He had the authority to bring a few people to the realms. "Lord Zhao, I have a friend whose cultivation foundation is damaged, and his spiritual meridian is also damaged, so..." Nietion smiled. He didn't expect that Zhao Zi would be so generous, so he continued to say. Zhao Zi chuckled and tossed out a few medicinal pills. "These are Tier 3 divine pills. They can heal any injuries of heavenly emperors. Not only that, they can also greatly increase their strength, helping them advance to the godly state." "Thank you, Lord Zhao." Nietion did not stand on ceremony. After receiving the divine pill, he sensed it with his divine sense. He was stunned. The aura within the divine pill was too strong. It was something he had never seen before. If he did not see it with his own eyes, it would be hard to believe that there was such a powerful elixir in the world. Nietion also knew that the divine pill was above the spiritual pill. "Kid, are you done with your conditions?" Zhao Zi laughed and asked. "Of course not." The corner of Nietion's mouth twitched, revealing a strange smile. He looked at Xue Di and said, "I still want to kill him." "Huh?" Zhao Zi frowned, and his face darkened when he sensed the killing intent in Nietion's eyes. He had agreed to all the conditions that Nietion had raised. Yet, he still wanted to kill him. It was a little too much. If Nietion wanted to kill an ordinary person, it would be fine. However, he wanted to kill the 9 emperors. More importantly, Xue Lingtian's identity was not just the 9 emperors. He was Xue Wushuang's father and Qian Lusha's teacher. Xue Wushuang and Qian Lusha were both talented martial artists of the Red Moon Divine Palace. The Red Moon Divine Palace was counting on them for the next grand competition of the 12 shrines. If Nietion killed Xue Lingtian and was recruited into the Red Moon Divine Palace, it would definitely infuriate Xue Wushuang and Qian Lusha. All in all, Zhao Zi couldn't let Nie Tian kill Xue Lingtian. However, Zhao Zi did not know that Nie Tian had already killed Qian Lusha's father, Qian Chenyu. If he entered the Red Moon Divine Palace, Qian Lusha would definitely take revenge on him. Chapter 1340. Yes, I must kill him. Nie Tian looked at Zhao Zi and said with determination, he must kill the Snow Empress, and no one could stop him. Zhao Zi looked into Nie Tian's eyes and saw the murderous intent in them, which made him shudder. At this moment, he had to consider whether it was worth it to offend Xue Wushuang and Thousand Flowing Kill for the sake of Nie Tian. He heard that Xue Wushuang and Thousand Flowing Kill had already condensed their godheads and were the most terrifying prodigies the Red Lunar Divine Palace had seen in the past 1,000 years. Xue Wushuang and Thousand Flowing Kill had only entered the god domain for 100 years, but they were able to condense their godheads in such a short time. On the other hand, Nie Tian's talent was even more terrifying, but he hadn't displayed it yet. Before talent became strength, it could only be talent and couldn't replace strength. With these thoughts in mind, the look in Zhao Zi's eyes gradually changed. He looked at Nie Tian and said coldly, "Young man, what if I insist on protecting Xue Lingtian? Then I refuse to join the Red Lunar Divine Palace." Nie Tianling replied indifferently, "You will return to the god domain sooner or later, but you can't bring Xue Lingtian back. You can protect him now, but you can't protect him forever. I will kill Xue Lingtian." The cold voice reverberated in the void, sending chills down everyone's spines. Lu Motu and the others were dumbfounded. They couldn't believe that Nie Tian dared to speak to Zhao Zi in such a tone. Nie Tian's words were a threat to Zhao Zi. "My lord, save me." The Snow Empress wailed pitifully when she felt Nie Tian's murderous intent. Zhao Zi stared at Nie Tian with a complicated expression. If the latter didn't join the Red Lunar Divine Palace, then he would be an enemy that must be eliminated. Zhao Zi couldn't bear to kill such a talented person with his own hands. For a moment, Zhao Zi was in a dilemma. He didn't know what enmity there was between the Snow Empress and Nie Tian, but judging from Nie Tian's attitude, it was impossible to reconcile. "My lord." At this moment, the Snow Empress suddenly thought of something and exclaimed as she pointed at Nie Tian and shouted, He's the god fiend origin embryo. Fiend god nascent embryo." Hearing these 4 words, Zhao Zi and Li Bo were stunned for a moment before they cried out in surprise. The 2 of them were from the upper realms, so they knew better than anyone else what a god fiend nascent embryo meant. The fiend god nascent embryo was an ancient taboo that shocked the entire god realm. Nie Tian was also stunned. He didn't expect the Snow Empress to reveal this matter at this moment. He had heard from the demonic way that his parents had been imprisoned because of the demon god embryo, and he had become an orphan because of it. From Zhao Zi and Li Bo's attitude, one could tell how terrifying the fiend god origin embryo was to them. Yes, suddenly, Li Bo's voice rang out again. "This brat is definitely the legendary fiend god nascent embryo. Otherwise, his strength wouldn't be so strange, and he wouldn't be able to possess the heart of nothingness and the dragon vein at the same time. The fiend god nascent embryo must have fused with the heart of nothingness and the dragon vein. Is that really the case?" After a long time, Zhao Zi also reacted. He looked at Nie Tian with a gloomy expression, but his eyes were filled with disbelief. He didn't sense any aura of the fiend god nascent embryo from Nie Tian's body. As far as he knew, there was only one person in the world who had the fiend god nascent embryo, and that was the son of those 2 people. However, after those 2 people were imprisoned, their son also disappeared mysteriously. If he was really still alive, he should be more than 200 years old, not 20. Zhao Zi could guess Nie Tian's bone age with one look. He was definitely not more than 200 years old. "My lord." At this moment, the Snow Empress guessed what Zhao Zi was thinking. She said, "This person is called Nie Tian, and he was one of the strongest people in the heaven realm. He fell 100 years ago, and now he is reincarnated." Reincarnated? Zhao Zi was stunned. and he finally understood something. He said in astonishment, "The fiend god nascent embryo has the power of reincarnation. Is this kid really the son of those two people?" Thinking of this, Zhao Zi was completely stunned and couldn't say a word for a long time. Nie Tian stood tall in the sky. His face was gloomy, and his eyes were trembling slightly. He didn't know how Zhao Zi would react next. "Lord Zhao, this kid is the fiend god nascent embryo. We must kill him. Kill him, and we will have made a great contribution." Li Bo became excited at this moment, and he screamed loudly, "Killing the fiend god nascent embryo is indeed a great contribution." Zhao Zi's reaction was very calm, and he sighed his heart. He said, "But it is also a great trouble. No matter what, the fiend god nascent embryo is the flesh and blood of the Nye family. Does the Nye family really not care about the fiend god nascent embryo?" The Nye family was a super giant that was even more terrifying than the 12 shrine palaces. At this moment, Zhao Zi hesitated. He even regretted knowing the real identity of Nye Tian. At this moment, he couldn't kill Nye Tian, and he could not kill him either. No matter what, he would get into trouble. "Lord Zhao, what are you hesitating for? The fiend god nascent embryo can't be left alive." Li Bo saw that Zhao Zi didn't move, and he couldn't help but scream anxiously, "Kill!" Zhao Zi frowned, and he made up his mind and released his entire body's aura. Since the disaster had come to him, he couldn't avoid it even if he wanted to. He could only brace himself and fight. Oh no! When Nye Tian saw the killing intent in Zhao Zi's eyes, his heart couldn't help but sink. Then, a sea of crimson golden lightning appeared behind him, and the crimson golden dragon appeared once again. Even if he was facing an expert like Zhao Zi, he still wanted to fight. Boom! Crack! However, Zhao Zi's aura spread out like a flood, and it directly pressed down on Nye Tian, making it hard for him to breathe. The crimson golden dragon didn't even have the slightest ability to resist, and with a loud explosion, it directly collapsed in the void, and the draconic aura spread out into space. Nye Tian's body trembled, and he violently vomited a mouthful of blood. Zhao Zi was a mid-god, and his strength was much stronger than Li Bo's. Before him, Nye Tian couldn't even withstand his aura. Zhao Zi's eyes flickered intensely, and the killing intent in his eyes finally solidified. He no longer hesitated. Wait! Just at this moment, a hurried voice rang out, following which a silhouette rushed over with a badge in his hand, raising it high up in the air. Zhao Zi's eyes darkened. He saw a flame flying over, and when he focused his eyes, he saw the token fluttering in the air. Feng Yun Medallion. The instant he saw the token, Zhao Zi's eyes trembled violently, and his face stiffened. Then, his aura abruptly dissipated. Nye Tian felt the enormous pressure disappear, and he immediately steadied himself. But his face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Weimo too. When he saw the figure that appeared beside him, he couldn't help but be stunned. Then his eyes focused on the token in Weimo 2's hand, and he was astonished. What kind of token was that? How could Zhao Zi be so afraid of it? Zhao Zi's figure froze in the air, and he looked at Weimo 2 in astonishment. He asked, "Who are you? Why do you have the Fengyun token?" The Fengyun token, the token of the Fengyun Ye clan, was even more terrifying than the Divine Palace Jade tokens of the 12 shrines. Weimo 2 was from the Divine Realm of the Heaven Realm. How could he have the Fengyun Ye clan's token? He is my man. At this moment, the void suddenly trembled, and a peerlessly domineering voice sounded. Then a figure descended, and the entire devouring devil abyss seemed to sink a little. Lord Emperor Yi. Seeing the figure in the air, Weimo 2 cried out in surprise. Chapter 1341. Demonic Devouring Abyss. A domineering figure descended, and a powerful pressure spread across the entire abyss. At this moment, he was like the ruler of the abyss. Everyone looked at the descending figure and felt the pressure in the space. They were extremely shocked, and even had the urge to prostrate and worship him. However, Nye Tian was stunned. He looked at the domineering figure not far away, and his mouth was wide open. He couldn't say a word. This face, this aura, it was so familiar. In the blink of an eye, Nietian felt a rumbling sound in his head as images of the past flashed through his mind, causing his soul to tremble violently and his whole body to tremble uncontrollably. Nietian. At this moment, the Frost Tharch realized that something was wrong with Nietian's reaction and couldn't help but exclaim, "Young master!" At almost the same time, Emperor Yi took a step forward and actually knelt on one knee in front of Nietian. He said in a low voice, "I'm late, and I've let you suffer. You really are Grandpa High." Nietian looked at the figure and the face in front of him, and he almost choked on his words. His face was filled with surprise and joy. He had never thought that he would meet the person who had raised him in the past year. "Young master, I am Yi Qinghai," Emperor Yi said in a low voice. His cold face was extremely moved, and his turbid eyes were filled with tears, as if they were about to fall. "Grandpa Hai, quickly get up." Nietian finally reacted. He took a step forward and helped Emperor Yi up. When he was young, his memories before the age of 5 were blank. However, he remembered Yi Qinghai very clearly. Perhaps some things and some people couldn't be suppressed by any power. Nietian remembered that Yi Qinghai had brought him to live in a different place almost every half a month. They had been chased by countless people, but they had all successfully escaped. If not for Yi Qinghai, Nietian would have died many times. At this moment, the Snow Tharch, the Frost Tharch, and the others were completely petrified. They looked at the scene in front of them in a daze. This person actually called Nietian Young Master, and even knelt down. How terrifying was Nietian's identity? For words, unimaginable. Of course, the Snow Empress could tell that Zhao Zi was extremely fearful of the newcomer. "Grandpa Hai, where have you been all these years?" Nietian calmed down slightly, yet his expression revealed a trace of seriousness amidst his joy. He knew that Yi Qinghai must have encountered something when he left. Otherwise, he would not have left him behind. "Young master, it's a long story." Emperor Yi let out a long sigh. Then, he laughed and said, "Fortunately, the young master is fine. This old servant did not fail to live up to master's expectations." Nietian forced a smile. It had been hard on him all these years. Yi Qinghai must have had it even harder. A moment later, both of them calmed down. At this moment, Nietian finally understood that the person behind the demonic roadmap was none other than Yi Qinghai. "Sir, who are you?" At this moment, Zhao Zi finally recovered from his shock. His face was filled with horror, and even his voice was trembling. "You're called Zhao Zi?" Emperor Yi turned around slightly and looked at Zhao Zi coldly. Yes. Zhao Zi's lips were trembling. His face was as pale as a sheet, and his forehead was dripping with cold sweat. Being stared at by Emperor Yi made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice house. It was like a little sheep being stared at by a lion. Zhao Zi concluded that Emperor Ye's strength was at least that of a superior god. He might even be a lord. A lord was the king of the gods. There were only 12 lord gods in the entire god-alarming domain staircase. They were the palace lords of the 12 divine palaces. No matter what, the newcomer's strength was far above his. If he reacted wrongly, he would be doomed eternally. Everyone looked at Emperor Yi. They did not know what he would do next. Suddenly, Emperor Yi laughed coldly. Then he stretched out his hand. Suddenly, the entire space shook. It was as if a gap had been torn between heaven and earth. A huge hand appeared in the air and grabbed towards Zhao Zi. Chi. Following that, an extremely horrifying sound rang out. The gigantic hand actually tore off one of Zhao Zi's arms. Zhao Zi was unable to resist at all. His body trembled slightly, and half of his body was dripping with blood. However, his reaction was still fast. A gust of divine power gushed out and directly sealed the wound, stopping the blood from flowing. When everyone saw Emperor Ye's attack, they were all stunned. One after another, they gasped and looked at Emperor Yi in horror. To directly cut off someone's arm, such an attack was too ruthless. It was truly domineering and fierce. However, Zhao Zi stood where he was and did not have much of a reaction. Instead, he was secretly delighted. Zhao Zi, you try to kill my young master. It's not too much for me to take something from you, right? Emperor Yi said coldly. There was a sly smile in his eyes. Thank you for not killing me, Your Excellency. Zhao Zi bowed slightly and was very respectful. A severed arm, to a god, wasn't even worth a strand of hair. It was not an exaggeration to say that Zhao Zi's arm could recover in a few days. Moreover, he did not need any elixirs. Emperor Yi only wanted one of his arms. It was indeed very generous. You're quite smart. Emperor Yi laughed. Then, he clenched his fist, and the arm turned into a ball of bloody light. A ring appeared in his hand. Young master, Zhao Zi is an outer sanctum elder of the Red Lunar Divine Palace. There should be a lot of good things in his spatial ring. They should be very useful to you now. Emperor Yi handed the ring to Nie Tian and said with a smile. Nie Tian was speechless. Emperor Yi actually cut off Zhao Zi's arm for the latter's spatial ring. Yi Qinghai was a smart man. Of course, cutting off Zhao Zi's arm was not as simple as the spatial ring. He wanted to shock and awe everyone. After all, Zhao Zi was a member of the Red Lunar Divine Palace and an outer sanctum elder. He could not kill him recklessly. Cutting off one of his arms was nothing to him. However, in the eyes of others, this was an extremely cruel punishment. Yi Qinghai wanted to use this method to tell everyone that Nie Tian could not be touched. Nie Tian took the spatial ring and couldn't help but smile. This was the spatial ring of a middle god. There must be a lot of good things in it. At this moment, the Snow Empress and the great Emperor of Ziwei were stunned when they saw Emperor Ye's attack. Cold sweat flowed down their backs, and even their tailbones felt cold. If they knew that there was such a person behind Nie Tian, they would not dare to go against Nie Tian, even if they had 10,000 gallbladders. At this moment, Emperor Yi suddenly turned around and looked at the Snow Empress with extreme killing intent. The Snow Empress' body trembled inexplicably. Her forehead was dripping with cold sweat. It was as if she could not even withstand Emperor Ye's gaze. Shueling Tian, no matter what, you are one of the 9 Emperor's supreme martial artists, yet you like to use underhanded methods, Emperor Yi said coldly. Back then, when you plotted to murder the young master, I was not in the heaven realm. Now, it is absolutely impossible for you to frame the young master. I will give you a chance. You and the young master have a fair fight. If you win, you can continue to live. If you lose, you can only die. Chapter 1342. Emperor Yi gave Xue Lingtian a chance to have a fair fight with Nie Tian, but Xue Lingtian was scared out of his wits. He saw with his own eyes that Nie Tian could even defeat a godly state warrior. How could he, a demigod, be a match for Nie Tian? My lord, the Snow Emperor subconsciously looked at Zhao Zi, hoping that the latter would say something for him. However, Zhao Zi deliberately avoided the Snow Emperor's gaze and pretended not to see it. At this moment, he could not even protect himself. How could he have the leisure to save the Snow Emperor? Xueling Tian, make your move. Nie Tian smiled faintly and took a step forward. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Nie Tian, The Snow Emperor looked at Nie Tian. He did not even have the courage to resist. He became extremely timid and did not look like a celestial emperor at all. Xueling Tian, you are the ruler of a world. Don't you even have the courage to fight with me? Nie Tianling smiled coldly. The killing intent in his eyes intensified. The great emperor of Ziwei and the Frost Emperor also frowned. They did not expect the Snow Emperor, who was usually high and mighty, to be so timid in the face of life and death. Nie Tian shook his head slightly and did not wait any longer. He took a step forward, and the sword will around him gushed out. It was accompanied by terrible black flames of nothingness and surging blood chi. He directly struck with his sword. Boom! The void shook slightly. In the air, a blood-red sword shadow surged with nothingness, and black flames of nothingness pressed down. No! At this moment, the Snow Emperor finally reacted and screamed. The fear in his heart was magnified infinitely through his suddenly dilated eyes. He wanted to resist, but it was too late. The moment before his death, the Snow Emperor's eyes surged with great fear and regret. When the sword's shadow fell, the Snow Emperor's figure completely disappeared. Not even his bones were left. The body of the 9 emperors and the dream of being in the godly state for hundreds of years had vanished. It was really regrettable. The Frost Emperor, the great emperor of Ziwei, and the others looked at the scene in front of them with complicated expressions. No matter what, the Snow Emperor had worked with them before. They hadn't expected the Snow Empress to die in such a manner. And yet Tian do it. At this time, great Emperor Ziwei stepped forward and said calmly. He was the Snow Empress helper. Once the Snow Empress died, Tian wouldn't allow him to live. However, he was a courageous person, unlike the Snow Empress, who was afraid of death. Great Emperor Ziwei, do it yourself, Tian said nonchalantly as he glanced at Great Emperor Ziwei. If one did something wrong, one had to accept the price. Even if Great Emperor Ziwei knew he was wrong, he still had to pay the price. Thank you. Great Emperor Ziwei forced a smile and said, I know I have done something wrong. Leaving behind the purple demon eyes can be considered compensation. As his indifferent and helpless voice fell, Great Emperor Ziwei's body shook, and he actually exploded. Amidst the bloody light, a pair of purple demon eyes remained. Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He extended his hand and stored the purple demon eyes into his space ring. The purple demon eyes was a good item, one of the 10 great innate special eyes. Zhao Zi looked at everything in front of him with a complicated and embarrassed expression. The 9 emperors were all chosen by him, but now they were being killed by others. How could he feel comfortable? However, no matter how uncomfortable he was, he could only watch without daring to make a sound. And yet Tian spread out his divine sense and sensed for a while. He didn't sense Donghuang's aura. It seemed that he was already dead. Previously, Donghuang received a direct blow from Tian and was severely injured. Then, Ren Wangyi arrived and directly suppressed to death by Ren Wangye's coercion. After dealing with the Snow Empress and the others, Tian's figure moved and returned to Yi Qinghai's side. He also didn't know how Yi Qinghai would deal with Zhao Zi and the others. After all, Zhao Zi and Li Bo were from the Red Lunar Divine Palace. Even Yi Qinghai didn't dare to kill them casually. However, the troublesome thing was that Zhao Zi and the others already knew that Tian had the God Fiend origin embryo. If he let them leave, it would be very inappropriate. My lord, I will definitely not leak the matter of the God Fiend origin embryo, Zhao Zi said fearfully as he took a step forward. He was a smart person. Of course, he knew that if a small character knew a big secret, it would usually not end well. If he had a choice, he would rather not know the identity of Tian. Zhao Zi, don't be nervous. Yi Qinghai smiled strangely and suddenly threw out a jade token. He said, You are an outer sect elder of the Red Lunar Divine Palace. Do you recognize this jade token? Scarlet Moon Jade Token. Zhao Zi took the jade token and was stunned on the spot. He didn't expect that Ren Wangyi could actually take out the Scarlet Moon Jade token of the Red Lunar Divine Palace. Zhao Zi, I want you to do something. After returning to the Red Lunar Divine Palace, take this jade token and look for your palace lord. Tell him that it's time for him to repay what he owes Yi Qinghai. Yi Qinghai said and seemed to remember something. His expression became a little complicated. Zhao Zi was stunned and immediately understood that the person in front of him should be an old friend of the Red Lunar Palace Lord. From his tone, it seemed that the Red Lunar Palace Lord owed him something. It was obvious that Yi Qinghai wanted the Red Lunar Palace Lord to protect the secret of the God Fiend origin embryo for him. I understand. Zhao Zi put away the Scarlet Moon Jade token and bowed respectfully. At this time, he already knew that the person in front of him must be an expert of the same level as the Red Lunar Palace Lord. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to speak like this. Zhao Zi, you are a smart person, but I still have to remind you. Yi Qinghai looked at Zhao Zi and sneered. He said, "If even half a word of what happened here gets out, I will definitely flatten the Red Lunar Divine Palace." Flatten the Red Lunar Divine Palace. Hearing Yi Qinghai's words, Zhao Zi's whole body trembled inexplicably, and he was covered in cold sweat. These words were too arrogant, so arrogant that it made people's hair stand on end. If it was someone else who said this, Zhao Zi would definitely treat them as a madman. But the person in front of him was different. Could it be that he is someone even more terrifying than a lord? Zhao Zi was shocked and secretly surprised. "Don't worry, my lord. I know what to do." Zhao Zi bowed slightly and didn't dare to raise his head to look at Ren Huangyi. "Very good." Yi Qinghai nodded slightly and waved his hand. "You can leave now." "Thank you, my lord." Zhao Zi heaved a sigh of relief, and his expression became much more relaxed. He agreed and prepared to leave. "Wait." At this time, Nietian took a step forward and suddenly said, "Lord Zhao, I would like to ask if our previous agreement still stands." "Huh?" Zhao Zi was stunned for a moment before he understood. Nietian was talking about him joining the Red Lunar Divine Palace. Zhao Zi looked at Yi Qinghai with a troubled expression. Nietian smiled faintly and said to Yi Qinghai, "Grandpa Hai, I want to join the Red Lunar Divine Palace." "Huh?" Yi Qinghai couldn't help but be stunned. He said, "Young master, the Red Lunar Divine Palace is just a small force in a vast territory. With your identity, there is no need for you to join them." "Grandpa Hai, I want to rely on my own strength." Nietian looked at Yi Qinghai and seemed extremely stubborn. Chapter 1343. Yi Qinghai looked at the determined Nietian and frowned. Young master's temper is the same as master's. He doesn't like to rely on others. After thinking for a while, Yi Qinghai nodded. "Young master can join the Red Moon Divine Palace, but you can't be apprenticed to a master." "Yes." Nietian nodded heavily when Yi Qinghai finally relented. He joined the Red Moon Divine Palace for better cultivation. He had no intention of being apprenticed to a master. "Zhao Zi, go back and tell the palace lord." Yi Qinghai looked at Zhao Zi and smiled. If the palace lord knew that Nietian was willing to join the Red Moon Divine Palace, he would probably be so excited that he wouldn't be able to sleep. Emperor Yi had heard that the Red Moon Divine Palace was in danger. If they were to be last in the next God-shocking realm competition, they would probably be removed from the 12 divine palaces. Without their position in the 12 divine palaces, the Red Moon Divine Palace would become an insignificant force and would soon be swallowed by other forces. If the palace lord knew that Nietian had joined the Red Moon Divine Palace, he wouldn't have leaked the matter of the demon god embryo even without Emperor Ye's threat. "Thank you, Lord." Zhao Zi bowed deeply and said to Nietian, "Lord, there are a few space-time scrolls in my spatial ring. They are enough for you to break through the space-time of the heaven realm and enter the territory." "Okay." Nietian smiled. There were indeed many good things in Zhao Zi's spatial ring. "Lord, I will take my leave." Zhao Zi bowed to Yi Qinghai and left immediately. Zhao Zi took Li Bo and flew into the sky. He didn't fear the space-time whirlpool above the devouring demon abyss and quickly left the abyss. "Lord Zhao, don't you find the name Yi Qinghai familiar?" After exiting the demonic devouring abyss, Li Bo's voice rang out with extreme shock. "Yi Qinghai is indeed familiar." Zhao Zi calmed down and murmured. Then he seemed to think of something and exclaimed, "Could he be the Emperor of Dark Hell who escaped from the Dark Sea Abyss prison tens of thousands of years ago?" The name Emperor of Black Hell was a taboo in all the domains, and no one was allowed to mention it. The Dark Sea Black Prison was a place where the most brutal people of the major realms were imprisoned. Tens of thousands of years ago, a peerless expert appeared in the Dark Sea of Darkness Prison. He was known as the Emperor of Darkness Prison. This person was the only one who escaped from the Dark Sea of Darkness Prison in the past hundreds of thousands of years. Oh my God! When Zhaozi thought of this, she only reacted after a long time. She let out a strange cry and said in a daze, "If this person really is the Emperor of Black Prison, then wouldn't he be even more terrifying than an overgod? It was only at this moment that Zhao Zi realized that Ran Huang Ye's words about flattening the Crimson Moon Divine Palace were not words of arrogance. The Emperor of Black Hell could even flatten the 12 shrines. Let's hurry back to the Divine Palace and report everything to the Palace Lord. Zhao Zi did not dare to linger any longer. His figure shot up into the 9 heavens, breaking through the void and disappearing into it. 4 God Realm warriors, the space barrier of the Heaven Realm and God Realm was nothing to them. They could directly break through the space barrier and step into the void. At the same time, in the demonic, devouring abyss, Ren Wangyi chuckled and said in his heart, "These 2 fellows seem to have guessed my identity. But this is good too. I guarantee that they won't tell anyone about what happened here." The conversation between Zhao Zi and Li Bo was actually heard by Yi Qinghai. "Demonic Lumen, your mission has been completed." At this moment, Yi Qinghai suddenly turned around and looked at the demonic lumen with killing intent. Killing intent. Nie Tian's expression flickered as he sensed killing intent from Yi Qinghai. "Lord Emperor Yi, you want to—" The lumen demon too was stunned. He suddenly realized something, and his whole body froze in fear. "That's right, I want to kill you." Yi Qinghai's face was cold, without a trace of emotion. At the same time, he looked at Coldness Emperor and said coldly, "You have to die too." "Grandpa Hai, what are you doing?" Nie Tian was stunned. He went forward to stop Yi Qinghai with a look of surprise on his face. "Young Master, the divine demon origin embryo is a shocking secret. The 2 of them know about it, so they can't be left alive." Yi Qinghai's face was cold. This old servant must ensure young Master's safety, so these 2 must die. The demonic lumen and Coldness Emperor were stunned at the same time. They couldn't speak for a long time. They didn't expect Yi Qinghai to be so ruthless. Anyone who knew about Nie Tian's secret would be killed. It seemed that in Yi Qinghai's eyes, he would do anything to protect Nie Tian's safety. "Grandpa Hai, I won't allow you to kill them." Nie Tian knew that Yi Qinghai was doing this for his sake, but he still couldn't allow the latter to do so. The demonic lumen had helped Nie Tian before, and Coldness Emperor was Chengju's wife. How could Nie Tian watch the 2 of them die? "Young Master, you're someone who's going to become a supreme being. Even though these people are your friends, they're also a potential threat to you. I hope young Master won't be soft-hearted," Yi Qinghai said in a deep voice. The killing intent in his body didn't disappear. "Grandpa Hai, I said that you can't kill them." Nie Tian was a little angry at this time. He said in a heavy tone, "If I have to kill people around me to become a supreme being, then I don't care if I don't become one." Although he didn't know what Yi Qinghai meant by supreme being, Nie Tian would never do something ungrateful. "Young Master." Yi Qinghai furrowed his brows and let out a long sigh. The killing intent in his body finally weakened and disappeared. "Grandpa Hai, I know you're doing this for my own good. However, there's a limit to what you can and can't do. Treachery and repaying kindness with enmity is something you can't do. I hope you won't blame me." Nie Tian's expression softened as he said lightly, "Young Master, this old servant won't blame you. No matter what happens in the future, this old servant will support young Master." Yi Qinghai nodded slightly and said in a heavy tone, "Grandpa Hai, don't call yourself this old servant in the future. You're my benefactor. Just call me Nie Tian." Nie Tian smiled and said, "Absolutely not." Yi Qinghai heard Nie Tian's words and became nervous. He hurriedly said, "Young Master and this old servant are master and servant. This old servant doesn't dare to call young Master by his name." Nie Tian's face darkened. It seemed that Yi Qinghai was also a very stubborn person. Nie Tian was very curious about what kind of person his father was. How could Yi Qinghai be so loyal to him? Without further ado, the group left the demon abyss. Nie Tian planned to return to the divine cold palace first, and Yi Qinghai followed him. On the way, Nie Tian couldn't help but ask, "Grandpa Hai, what is your relationship with the palace master of the Red Moon Divine Palace? Does he owe you a big favor?" He was very curious about what the palace master of the Red Moon Divine Palace owed Yi Qinghai to be willing to keep such a shocking secret like the god-fiend origin embryo for him. He doesn't owe me a favor. He owes me his life. Yi Qinghai smiled faintly and said, Qi Yefeng is my little brother. I saved his life in the past. Little brother? Nie Tian was stunned. One of the palace masters of the 12 divine palaces was actually Yi Qinghai's little brother. Just how terrifying was the latter's identity? Chapter 1344. Divine Cold City, Divine Cold Hall. Nie Tian and the others were sitting in the hall. They were happy that Nie Tian had returned safely. Big brother, you have returned safely. I guess Xue Di has been killed by you, right? Long Outyin chuckled and said loudly. Nie Tian nodded and said, Xue Ling Tian is dead. Then Nie Tian briefly explained what happened in the demonic devouring abyss. Everyone was dumbfounded. Everyone looked at Yi Qinghai. Only now did they realize that this old man who had restrained his aura was actually a legendary godly state expert. However, they did not know that Yi Qinghai was not an ordinary godly state expert. His strength was definitely at the top of all the realms. With a faint smile, Yi Qinghai ran his gaze across the crowd and asked, Lord Nie Tian, are these your friends? In order not to arouse suspicion, Yi Qinghai did not address Nie Tian as young lord, nor did he address himself as old slave. Yeah. Nie Tian nodded vigorously and introduced everyone to him. Mo Qianjun, Jiu Qian Sheng, Gui Hin, Tian Gong, Long Outyin, Cheng Ju, and the others nodded respectfully. This was the first time they had seen a legendary godly state expert. One could imagine the shock in their hearts. With a single glance, Yi Qinghai was able to determine everyone's strength. He couldn't help but smile and say, Lord Nie Tian's friends are all peak experts of the heaven realm. Not bad. As he spoke, the corners of Yi Qinghai's mouth rose into a smile. In the end, his gaze locked on a Long Outyin, and he loudly said, especially this guy, he actually has the legendary 9-seal true dragon physique, a super heaven rank heaven-earth spiritual physique. This kind of talent is monstrous even in the realms. Thank you for your compliment, Lord. Long Outyin chuckled and felt proud of himself. Of course, he was happy to be praised by a godly state expert. However, until now, Long Outyin had not figured out what a 9-seal true dragon was. Moreover, his true dragon body seemed to have undergone some changes. It had fused with the rainbow illusory seal that the illusion emperor had left in his body. It was very strange. Seeing that Yi Qinghai seemed to respect Long Outyin, Nie Tian couldn't help but say, Old Hai, Outyin is my sworn younger brother. He has just awakened to the 9 seals' real dragon body, and he needs a teacher to teach him. Old Hai. At this time, Nie Tian had also changed the way he addressed Yi Qinghai, calling him Elder Hai. Yi Qinghai was stunned for a moment before he understood Nie Tian's meaning. He couldn't help but look at Long Outyin and said, This brat's talent and strength aren't bad. He barely qualifies to be my disciple. Disciple. Long Outyin was stunned for a moment before letting out a strange cry. No matter how stupid he was, he still came to his senses. He took a step forward and said in a loud voice, Master, please accept disciple Long Outyin's bow. Get up. Yi Qinghai faintly smiled and slightly raised his hand. From the void, a mighty force lifted Long Outyin up. He said, You are young, Lord Nie Tian's sworn younger brother. But even so, if you do anything wrong in the future, this emperor will still kill you. Everyone was stunned. They didn't expect Yi Qinghai to be so overbearing. Even to his own disciple, he would casually use the word kill. Nie Tian slightly curled his lips. He knew that if Yi Qinghai turned hostile, he wouldn't give him any face. If it wasn't for him, Lu Motu and Frost the Arch would have died in the devil-devouring abyss. However, Long Outyin was Nie Tian's sworn younger brother after all. Yi Qinghai definitely couldn't kill him casually. What he said just now was just to scare him. Master, don't worry. I, Long Outyin, have always been righteous. I won't let you down. Long Outyin wasn't afraid at all. He loudly said with a stern face, To be able to acknowledge a deity realm powerhouse as master Long Out Yin was naturally happy. But he did not know that this master of his was very remarkable. He was once a taboo figure of a realm, a super powerhouse who did not even pay attention to the deity realm's palace lord. For Long Out Yin to be able to acknowledge Yi Qinghai as his master, Nie Tian was sincerely happy for him. Maybe the next time he saw Long Out Yin again, the latter would already be a peerless powerhouse. Following that, Nie Tian didn't waste any more time. He took out several divine pills and distributed them to everyone present. And Yi Qinghai nodded and said, "Most of you are peak Heavenly Emperor powerhouses. After consuming these divine pills, not only will your strength advance a step further, but you also have hopes of assailing the deity realm. But this has to wait until you enter the realm before you can do it. Deity realm, one must condense the divine spark, and condensing the divine spark required the power of a god. The heaven realm's divine realm practically had no god power. Wanting to advance to the deity realm in the heaven realm was undoubtedly a fool's talk. Nie Tian already made a decision in his heart. After he settled the heaven realm's divine realm's matters, he would enter the realm together with Mo, Qianjun, and the rest. After everyone consumed the divine pills, there were no abnormalities. They returned to their respective residences and started cultivating bitterly. Above the divine cold great hall, only Nie Tian, Yi Qinghai, Chengju, and the rest were left. Nie Tian took out the 3 live stone and let Qi Wuxiaoshan and the rest come out. Eldest senior brother, second senior brother. When Chengju saw Han Fei and Zhang Jianqing, 2 people, he cried out in shock, a sorrowful look on his face. Qi Wuxiaoshan, Han Fei, and Zhang Jianqing, 3 people, were all severely injured, their auras weak. Yi Qinghai was incredibly shocked. He did not think that Nie Tian actually had such a good thing like the 3 live stone on him. But when Yi Qinghai saw Qi Wuxiaoshan, his expression fell, killing intent actually surging all over his body. Oh hi! Sensing Yi Qinghai's reaction, Nie Tian could not help but cry out in shock, stopping the latter. Young master, this person is the one who betrayed master and his wife. Yi Qinghai's cold eyes stared at Qi Wuxiaoshan, looking like he wanted to kill him. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, but he still did not give in. He said solemnly, "Old Hai, please tell me what happened in the past." Yi Qinghai's eyes suddenly became complicated, but he still stared at Qi Wuxiaoshan. He had already guessed that Nie Tian knew about his relationship with Qi Wuxiaoshan. After hesitating for a long time, Yi Qinghai sighed and briefly recounted what happened in the past. When Nie Tian was born, his identity was not exposed, and no one knew that he was a god-fiend nascent embryo, except for a few people closest to him. But Qi Wuxiaoshan objected to Nie Tian's parents being together, and actually told the upper realms that Nie Tian was a god-fiend nascent embryo. After that, Nie Tian's parents were captured by people from the upper realms and imprisoned. So that's how it is. Hearing this, Nie Tian's expression immediately became gloomy. At this time, he understood what Qi Wuxiaoshan's words meant before he died. Nie Tian, you must find your mother, and tell her on my behalf that I'm sorry for what happened in the past. This was what Qi Wuxiaoshan had said at that time, and Nie Tian had always remembered it. It seemed that these years, Qi Wuxiaoshan must have been very remorseful. Otherwise, he would not have said such words at the moment of his death. What happened in the past was indeed Qi Wuxiaoshan's fault, but he already knew that he was wrong. Moreover, in order to save Nie Tian, he had risked his life several times. This kind of kindness was enough to make up for the mistakes of the past. Chapter 1345. Sigh. In the divine Frost Great Hall, Yi Qinghai let out a long sigh, and his killing intent finally dissipated. Qi Wuxiaoshan saved Nie Tian's life many times, indicating that he was indeed very regretful about what happened back then. "Oh Hai, I promise you that I will definitely rescue my parents." Nie Tian looked at Yi Qinghai and said solemnly, his eyes sharp and firm, "Young lord, this old servant believes you." Yi Qinghai nodded slightly, but he knew in his heart that wanting to rescue Nie Tian's parents was definitely not an easy thing. Yi Qinghai was already in existence close to the peak, but he did not even know where Nietian's parents were. At this time, it was simply impossible for Nietian to want to rescue them. Next, Nietian checked the injuries of Chi Wuxioshan and the other two, and let the three consume some ordinary spirit pills first to recover their strength. Then, Nietian handed 3 divine pills to Chengju and instructed, when the 3 of them wake up, let them consume the divine pills. Yes, Chengju nodded respectfully and took the divine pills. Currently, Nietian had hundreds of divine pills in his hands, all obtained from Zhao Zi's interspatial ring. This Zhao Zi really had a lot of goods. There were all kinds of divine pills, martial techniques, and divine artifacts in his interspatial ring. Nietian estimated that after Chi Wuxioshan, Han Fei, and Zhang Jianqing consumed the divine pills, their strength could reach the peak of Heavenly Emperor. According to Zhao Zi, these divine pills were all third-ranked divine pills. It seemed that there were even higher-ranked divine pills. Divine pills of that level must have even stronger medicinal effects. Divine pills were of a higher rank than spirit pills. Nietian did not even know how divine pills were refined. It must have been refined with the power of bright spirit, Nietian guessed. Immediately, Nietian handed Chi Wuxioshan and the others to Chengju, and then left with Yi Qinghai. He still had many things to ask the latter. After a while, Nietian and Yi Qinghai came to a small courtyard. "Old Hai, tell me about my parents." Nietian smiled faintly, but his voice was slightly trembling. "Young master." Yi Qinghai bowed slightly. He already knew that Nietian would ask this question, but his expression was a little complicated. In the end, he said, "Your mother is Qi Wu Yunxiu, the saintess of the 9 underworlds. Your father is called Nie Fenghua." Yi Qinghai told the story of how Nietian's parents met and fell in love with each other, but deliberately avoided mentioning Nie Fenghua's identity. "Old Hai, I want to know who my father is." Nietian frowned and asked. Nietian already knew a little about his mother, Qi Wu Yunxiu. However, he did not know the identity of his father, Nie Fenghua. Judging from Yi Qinghai's identity, Nie Fenghua's status should be extremely high. "Your father is..." Yi Qinghai looked into the distance. After hesitating for a while, he finally said, "He's the young alliance master of the Wind and Cloud Alliance." Wind and Cloud Alliance. Hearing these 3 words, Nietian suddenly thought of the Wind and Cloud Medallion that the wayward demonic two took out. His expression became even more complicated. When Zhao Zi saw the Wind and Cloud Medallion, she was extremely terrified. From this, it could be seen that the Wind and Cloud Alliance was definitely a more terrifying force than the Red Moon Divine Palace. "Young master, you're still too weak now. There are some things that I cannot tell you. You only need to know that the Wind and Cloud Alliance is a super force, and the Wind and Cloud Nie family is one of the 9 great clans of creation." Yi Qinghai nodded. He could not explain to Nietian how powerful the Wind and Cloud Alliance was, so he could only tell Nietian this. "The Wind and Cloud Nie family," Nietian murmured. His eyes were unusually sharp. He would personally enter the realms in the future to find out what kind of force the Wind and Cloud Alliance was. He felt a little strange, since the Wind and Cloud Alliance was so powerful, and his father was the young alliance master, who dared to imprison his father. "Phew!" Nietian let out a long breath and said in his heart, "It's too early to think about this. Let's settle the matter at hand first." Nietian knew that Yi Qinghai would not tell him anything about his parents if he asked again. So he stopped asking and said, "Elder Hai, tell me about the Godly Realm." Godly Realm. This was the realm that all Heaven Realm martial artists dreamed of. Until now, Nietian's understanding of the Godly Realm was still very shallow. Yi Qinghai nodded slightly and said, "Actually, there's not much difference between the Godly Realm and the realms below the Heavenly Emperor Realm. The biggest difference is the Divine Spark. Once a martial artist condenses the Divine Spark, he is considered to have officially stepped into the Godly Realm. The Godly Realm is divided into 5 realms: Low God, Middle God, High God, Main God, and Supreme God. Each realm is further divided into 4 small realms: early stage, middle stage, late stage, and peak stage. For example, that Zhao Zi you met is an early stage mid-god, while the other person is an early stage low god. Early middle god and early low god. Yet Tian murmured and said, "No wonder I could defeat the first person, but couldn't even withstand Zhao Zi's aura." So there is a big difference between the two. Yi Qinghai nodded and said, "A low god has just condensed the divine spark, but a middle god's divine spark is already very stable. The difference between the two is like heaven and earth. Elder Hai, if Zhao Zi is an outer elder of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, then the inner elders of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace are all high gods?" Tian suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but laugh. "That's right." Yi Qinghai nodded again and said, "The Crimson Moon Divine Palace is one of the 12 divine palaces of the God Realm. Its inner elders are roughly high gods, and its palace master, Qi Yefeng, has the strength of a main god." Main god? Tian's eyes flickered and seemed to be a little excited. He guessed that main gods should be the peak strength of the God Realm. At that moment, Tian suddenly looked at Yi Qinghai and said with a smile, "Elder Hai, what realm is your strength now?" Yi Qinghai seemed to not even care about the Crimson Moon Palace Master. His strength was at least at the peak of main god, or maybe even higher. "Let's not talk about this old servant strength. I'm just a little stronger than those palace masters." Yi Qinghai chuckled. Then, his expression turned solemn as he said, "However, master strength is at the top of the realms. Among all the peak experts in the realms, only those old monsters who have lived for hundreds of thousands of years can surpass him. My father is that powerful." Tian's eyes slightly trembled, and he suddenly asked, "Elder Hai, how old is my father now?" "Master is about 60,000 years old." Yi Qinghai smiled faintly. 60,000 years old. Tian was stunned and petrified on the spot. Chiwuxi Ocean was only 500 or 600 years old, which meant that Qi Yunxiu was around the same age. So, the age difference between Ye Fenghua and Qi Yunxiu was a little big. Yi Qinghai seemed to know what Tian was thinking. He smiled faintly and said, 60,000 years old is still very young for a godly realm martial artist. At most, you could be considered as a youth. Chapter 1346. In the small courtyard, Yi Qinghai couldn't help but laugh when he saw Tian's shocked expression. He said, "The cultivators of the plain world all think that God realm cultivators are immortal existences. In fact, this view is not correct." "What do you mean?" Tian was slightly taken aback. He had always thought that after advancing to the deity realm, he would be able to live as long as heaven and earth. Yi Qinghai sighed softly and said, "The lifespan of a divine realm martial artist is not eternal. There is a limit. Generally speaking, every time a deity realm cultivator advanced to a major realm, it would be able to increase one's lifespan by 100,000 years. Even those old monsters at the pinnacle of the highest level can live up to 400,000 to 500,000 years. If they can't find a way to break through, their lifespan will also reach its limit. So that's how it is." Tian frowned and looked shocked. However, to a martial artist of the heaven realm or divine realm, being able to live for 100,000 years or even hundreds of thousands of years wasn't much different from an eternity. One had to know, peak Heavenly Emperor martial artists also only had 1,000 years of lifespan at most. From peak Heavenly Emperor to initial stage low god realm, this jump could let martial artists increase their lifespan by 100,000 years. This was a qualitative leap. A martial artist at the peak of the immortal state had a lifespan of 50 years. In this case, Tian's father was only over 60,000 years old, which was quite young. From Yi Qinghai's words, one could tell that even if Nie Fenghua's strength wasn't at the pinnacle, it wasn't far from it. "Young master, this old servant can't stay in the heavenly realm for too long. Soon, I will have to return to the god domain. You must be extra careful when you enter the god domain." At this time, Yi Qinghai suddenly frowned and said with a solemn expression, "Old Hai, is there anything you need to do?" Tian asked curiously. "Yes. Yi Qinghai nodded solemnly. More than 200 years ago, this old servant received news that Master was imprisoned in the realm of darkness. So this old servant left at that time. It's just that in these past 200 years, this old servant has searched the entire realm of darkness, but I haven't found any traces of Master. This old servant intends to return to the realm of darkness and continue searching for Master's whereabouts. As long as this old servant receives any clues, I will definitely inform young lord. Domain of darkness. Hearing these words, Nietian couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. This was the third realm he had heard of, and it sounded extremely dangerous. However, Yi Qinghai was very strong, so Nietian didn't need to worry about him. Nietian was curious about the story between his father and Yi Qinghai for the latter to be so loyal. Old Hai, when are you planning to leave? Nietian asked. Tomorrow. Yi Qinghai nodded and said, the realm has a rule that those who aren't adjudicators can't descend into this plane world. If I stay here for too long, I'll definitely attract attention. I'm afraid that other godhood experts will descend, and that won't be good. Yes. Nietian nodded his head. No wonder there were so few god-state rankers in the heaven realm. It was because of this rule. Young lord, when this old servant leaves this time, I plan to bring your sworn brother along with me. Is there any problem? Yi Qinghai suddenly asked. Of course. Nietian happily agreed. To be able to stay by Yi Qinghai's side was definitely a great opportunity for Long Outyin. Yi Qinghai nodded his head with a smile and said, this old servant will go find him now. After that, Yi Qinghai didn't stay any longer and disappeared. Nietian stood on the spot. He was extremely shocked and couldn't calm down for a long time. He felt that a door had opened in front of him, and a whole new world was waiting for him. Nietian. At this time, an anxious voice sounded, and a beautiful figure appeared. It was Mo Rushi. Obviously, Mo Rushi had been waiting for Nietian for a long time. Rushi, I'm sorry for making you worry. Nietian saw Mo Rushi and smiled with relief. The haze in his heart was swept away, and he took a step forward and pulled the ladder into his arms. It's good that you're fine. Mo Rushi raised her small face, and her gem-like eyes flickered with tenderness. At this moment, Nietian's whole body melted in this gentleness. The next morning, when the mottled sunlight fell on the room, Nietian got off the bed. He gently kissed Mo Rushi's forehead, and the latter opened her sleepy eyes, looking as shy as a flower. Yi Qinghai was going to leave today. Thinking of this, Nietian felt a little disappointed. A moment later, Nietian and Mo Rushi's figures appeared on the square outside the Divine Cold Palace. At this time, Mo Qianjun and the others were cultivating hard and didn't appear. Young master, Yi Qinghai was already waiting on the square, and when he saw Nietian walking over, he bowed and shouted, this is... Yi Qinghai saw a girl beside Nietian, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He was a little shocked and asked in surprise, she's my wife, Mo Rushi. Nietian smiled faintly and introduced, Rushi, this is Elder Hai. He is a God-state martial artist. God-state martial artist. Mo Rushi's small face was full of surprise and shock. Wife. Yi Qinghai was stunned. He didn't expect that Nietian was already married, but his eyes were fixed on Mo Rushi, as if he was sensing something, and finally couldn't help but say, young master, is this girl the legendary sage? Yes. Before Yi Qinghai finished, Nietian nodded solemnly. Oh my God, it really is the sage body. Yi Qinghai's expression changed, and he exclaimed in his heart. He never thought that he would meet the legendary #1 martial body of all times here. The sage body was far more terrifying than Long Outyin's 9 Seals true dragon body. Even Nietian's celestial demon, nascent embryo, wouldn't dare to say that it was stronger than the sage body. Master is the god-forbidden embryo, and found a female master of the extreme demon embryo, who gave birth to a celestial demon embryo. If young master and this girl had a child, how terrifying the child's talent would be. Yi Qinghai suddenly thought of this, and he murmured in his heart, his whole body directly petrified. If Nietion and Mo Rushi had a child, the child's talent would be unimaginable. Seeing Yi Qinghai's reaction, Nietion thought that the latter was shocked by Mo Rushi's strength, and he couldn't help but laugh, and said, Rushi's sage body has just awakened, and her great potential has not been revealed yet. Yi Qinghai nodded slightly, and finally calmed down, and said goodbye to Nietion and Mo Rushi, and did not stay any longer. This time, Yi Qinghai not only brought Long Outyin with him, but also Lu Mo too and Kong Shibua. Nietion was very curious about Kong Shibua's identity, and why Lu Mo too respectfully called him young master, and Yi Qinghai also doted on him. But Yi Qinghai didn't say, so Nietion didn't ask too much. Yi Qinghai and the others didn't stay any longer, and their figures soared into the sky, directly breaking through the void. Looking at the void crack high in the sky, Nietion's expression was somewhat complicated. After today's departure, he didn't know when they would meet again. Chapter 1347. In the blink of an eye, several months passed. In the divine cold palace, in a secluded courtyard, finally succeeded. In the room, a joyous voice sounded out, clearly very excited. Following that, the door to the room opened, and a figure walked out, actually somewhat unfamiliar. For some reason, this figure flickered with a strange light, appearing somewhat illusory, as though it was not a physical body. Looking closely, this face was actually very familiar. It was Nietion's soul slave, Niechio. Corpse Luo, you finally have a normal physical body. At this time, another figure walked out. It was Nietion. Nietion looked at Niechio in front of him, appearing very satisfied. The current Niechio, although his body and appearance did not change, but he had a brand new soul, Corpse Luo, Demon Lord. Corpse Luo, Demon Lord. He abandoned the spirit-devouring rat body and took over Niechio's body. Previously, Niechio was just a remnant soul body, emotionless and emotionless, just right to be Corpse Luo, Demon Lord's physical body material. Nietion found a body remodeling divine pill in Zhao Zi's interspatial ring, allowing Niechio's body to gradually condense into a physical body. Niechio, since this Lord has used your body, then this Lord will continue to use your name. In the future, there will be no Corpse Luo Demon Lord, only Niechio. Corpse Luo Demon Lord felt his new body and was very satisfied. As he spoke, his palm flipped, and a surging vortex actually appeared in his hand. Godhead. What appeared in Niechio's hand was a godhead. Niechio's original body was Juying Divine Palace's elder Ju Qinchio. Back then, when Ju Qinchio's soul clone descended, he had the strength of a 9th-level heavenly emperor, but his original body's strength was deity realm. Niechio's body contained the bright god power. Adding on the divine pill's bright god power, it actually allowed Corpse Luo Demon Lord to condense a godhead. Corpse Luo Demon Lord advanced to deity realm before entering the domain. Niechio. This name is much better than Corpse Luo Demon Lord. Nietion smiled faintly and said, My soul blood contract with you back then should be removed. From now on, you are a free man. With a thought, Nietion caused the blood-soul contract to appear in front of him. It trembled violently and then was destroyed. Corpse Demon Lord had been by Nietion's side for a long time and had helped him a lot. Moreover, his personality had gradually changed. At least, he was no longer a cruel and bloodthirsty person. The soul blood contract was no longer needed. Thank you, Master. Niechio laughed and said, Master, I have nowhere to go now and wish to continue staying by Master's side. I seek Master's permission. Nietion's face darkened. He never thought that Niechio would actually make such a request. He laughed and said, Niechio, you can continue to follow me, but we will no longer be master and servant. We will be friends. Thank you, Master. Oh no, thank you, Master. Niechio chuckled, and his somewhat illusory body trembled slightly. It had to be said that Nietion treated Niechio well. Not only did he reconstruct his body, he even gave him the silver wolf's hand and purple demon eyes. The current Nietchio was not only a God Realm martial artist, he even had the silver wolf's hand and purple demon eyes. Maybe it was because he had reconstructed his body, but the silver wolf's hand and purple demon eyes had fused almost perfectly. Nietion could feel that Nietchio's current strength was definitely stronger than a Judicatorly bow. The silver wolf's hand and purple demon eyes had a unique characteristic that would become stronger along with a martial artist. Nietion was curious. How strong were these two things on Nietchio's body? "Master, I have a small request." Just then, Nietchio suddenly laughed slyly and said, "What request?" Nietion was startled for a moment, then laughed. "Master, please leave a spirit imprint on my body. That way, I can enter and exit the 3 live stone at any time." Nietchio laughed and said, "I can feel that the reason why I can directly condense my god lattice is because I absorbed a lot of starry sky, saint flames in the hellfire furnace. The starry sky saint flame can make me stronger." Starry sky saint flame. Nietion frowned. He then recalled that Corpse Demon Lord had used the starry sky saint flame to refine Nietchio as a soul slave. Could it be that the starry sky saint flame contains bright spirit power? Nietion felt that it was strange. He muttered. Of course he would not reject Nietchio. He shot out his divine sense and left a spirit imprint on the latter's body. Generally speaking, martial artists could not leave a spirit imprint on other people because martial artists themselves had their own spirit imprint. But Nietchio had a blood pact with Nietion in the past, so it was different. "Master, I will go take a look inside the 3 live stone. It seems like Lady Cher is about to awaken," Nietchio said, then disappeared. With Nietion's spirit imprint, Nietchio could directly enter the former's soul space. Nietion nodded his head, calculating the time. Cher should be awakening soon. Cher's body contained the 3 lives meridians, and she had absorbed over 10,000 Sword Dao inheritances. Who knows what kind of strength she would have after her awakening? Nietion estimated that Cher might directly reach the strength of a lower god, or even stronger. One must know that the 10,000 Sword Dao inheritances were left behind by ancient God Realm powerhouses. One could imagine how powerful they were. Rushi's closed-door training is about to end. I reckon that after she comes out, her strength will reach the peak of Heavenly Emperor. Nietion suddenly thought of Mo Rushi and muttered. Mo Rushi had consumed the divine pill. In addition to her saint physique, removing the saint imprint, the saint energy in her body would be completely released. She would definitely reach the peak of Heavenly Emperor. Nietion had been trying to break through to the God Realm recently, try to condense his godhead, but the Heaven Realm's deity, Domain's God-E energy was pitifully scarce, so he failed multiple times. In fact, Nietion had many kinds of God-E energy in his body, but it was not easy to fuse them together. I have to go to the Realm verse as soon as possible. Nietion thought of the heart of nothingness in his body, and his face turned solemn. He still had to find the boundary of the first demonic fire universe. Otherwise, the power of the stars would not be able to suppress the heart of nothingness. Let's go see Debeo, Ro and the others. Nietion thought of Jean Debeo and the others, and the corners of his mouth curled up, and he was about to leave the courtyard. A few months ago, he had asked Han Ling and the others to bring Jean Debeo, Neuro, Li, Tang Hao, and many people related to him to the Heaven Realm. During this period, apart from cultivating, Nietion spent time with his old friends, and it could be said that he had a very leisurely life. Kaboom! However, just as Nietion walked out of the courtyard, there was an explosion in the sky. He squinted his eyes and looked at the sky, only to see a crack in the sky, and several figures walked out of the crack. God Realm experts. Nietion frowned, and his eyes trembled. He activated the holographic divine patterns and locked onto the figures in the sky. It's Zhao Zi and the others. In the next moment, Nietion saw a familiar face, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he murmured, "They should be here to make arrangements for the new 9 emperors in the Heaven Realm." Among the 9 emperors, several had died, and the Heaven Realm was shaken. It was time to make arrangements for the new 9 emperors. Hmm. However, at this moment, Nietion's eyes changed slightly, and he saw a figure behind Zhao Zi, and it looked somewhat familiar. Thousand killing streams. Nietion squinted his eyes and stared at the person behind Zhao Zi, and he shouted a name. Chapter 1348. Thousand flowing kill. Nietion looked up at the unexpected face in the sky. His eyes slightly narrowed as he thought to himself, why is he here? Could he be the new adjudicator? Nietion remembered that Yi Qinghai had told him that there was a rule in this realm that forbade God Realm cultivators from appearing in other planes, unless they were adjudicators. Let's go to the Divine Cold Palace first. Nietion frowned and decided to go there first. Moments later, Nietion appeared on the square outside the Divine Cold Palace. At this time, Frost the Arch, Chengju, and the others also appeared. Master, Han Fei and Zhang Jianqing had also fully recovered and had reached the peak of Heavenly Emperor strength. The two shouted in unison when they saw Nietion. Nietion nodded slightly and looked up at the sky. Up in the sky, dark clouds rumbled as Zhao Zi and the others descended from the sky, bringing with them a tremendous might that was extremely terrifying. Lord Zhao. Nietion took a step forward and greeted Zhao Zi. Mr. Nietion. Zhao Zi already knew Nietion's name. He forced a smile, but his face did not look too good. Behind him stood two figures. One was Thousand Flowing Kill, and the other was a red-haired man. His body was as red as fire and looked extremely demonic. Thousand Flowing Kill. Frost the Arch and the others also recognized Thousand Flowing Kill and couldn't help but exclaim. They did not expect him to appear here. At this moment, Thousand Flowing Kill's aura was concealed, but the killing intent in his eyes was not concealed. He stared coldly at Nietion. Obviously, he already knew everything. Once Zhao Zi returned to the Red Lunar Divine Palace, he would definitely report everything to his superiors. Then, Thousand Flowing Kill would know what happened in the Heaven Domain. Nietion's consciousness swept across Thousand Flowing Kill and found that the latter's aura was not any weaker than the previous adjudicator. It seems that Thousand Flowing Kill has condensed his godhead and ascended to the God Realm. Nietion frowned and thought. Han Shua's guess was correct. Thousand Flowing Killer's current strength was that of an early-stage low god, and there were faint signs of him advancing to a mid-stage low god. It had only been a little over 100 years since he entered the God Domain from the Heaven Domain. To be able to condense a godhead in such a short period of time, he was already a genius. Long time no see, Thousand Flowing Killer. Nietion raised his head slightly, not avoiding Thousand Flowing Kill's gaze at all. He smiled faintly, his smile extremely playful. Nietion. Qian Lu stared fixedly at Nietion with an extremely murderous gaze. He shouted out the latter's name word by word, showing how much he hated the latter. Although Nietion's appearance had changed, his old aura was still there. Thousand Flowing Kill could naturally recognize him at a glance. So you two know each other. Zhao Zi smiled awkwardly and said, Qianlu Sha is the new adjudicator of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. This time, he came to the Heaven World's divine realm to appoint the new 9 monarchs. As expected, Nietion's heart trembled slightly. The adjudicators were really here to appoint the new 9 emperors. However, Thousand Flowing Kill's motive was obviously not pure. He was here for Nietion. How could Thousand Flowing Kill let go of Nietion with a hatred of killing his father and master? However, Thousand Flowing Kill was currently suppressing his anger. It was obvious that he couldn't casually make a move on Nietion. Zhao Zi knew of Nietion's identity and secretly signaled Thousand Flowing Kill to not be agitated. After Zhao Zi returned to the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, he had already informed everything to the Crimson Moon Empress. The latter was very happy that Nietion was able to join the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. She even shouted that the time for the Crimson Moon Divine Palace to rise had arrived. Qi Yefeng told Zhao Zi not to reveal a word about Nietion to anyone. After Nietion joined the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, everything would be handled like an ordinary disciple. There wouldn't be any preferential treatment. Zhao Zi knew that Qi Yefeng did this to avoid arousing suspicion. Cough, cough. At this moment, Zhao Zi coughed twice and said, "This time, the new 9 emperors will be appointed. This elder will be the main arbiter. Vincent and Thousand Flowing Kill will be the assistant arbiters." Vincent, this was the name of the red-haired young man. Nie Tian could faintly sense that Vincent's strength was above Thousand Flowing Kills. He seemed to be a mid-stage low god. At this moment, Vincent was looking around absent-mindedly, as though he didn't care about anything in front of him. "Lord Arbiters, please." Mao Xianglong calmed down, bowed slightly, and said respectfully, although Thousand Flowing Kill used to be a member of the Heaven Realm, his current status was different from before. Mao Xianglong and the others had to be respectful. Zhao Zi and the others arrived at the Divine Cold Hall and took their seats. Zhao Zi sat on the main seat and swept his gaze across everyone. He coughed twice and said, "Something happened in the Heaven Realm. Among the 9 emperors, the Snow Emperor, the Illusion Emperor, the Purple Emperor, the Day-Night Emperor, the Pill Emperor, and the East Emperor are dead. Only the Frost Emperor, the Poison Emperor, and the Meow Emperor are left. The Heaven Realm cannot be without a leader. I came here this time to appoint the new 9 emperors. 6 of the 9 emperors died. 5 of them died at the hands of Nie Tian. Only the Illusion Emperor was killed by the Snow Emperor. When Thousand Flowing Kill heard Zhao Zi's words, especially when he heard the 2 words Snow Emperor, the fierceness in his eyes intensified. He actually released his killing intent towards Nie Tian without concealing it. Nie Tian completely ignored Thousand Flowing Kill and laughed. He looked at Zhao Zi and asked, "Lord Zhao, I would like to know, what does the 9 emperors represent?" Until now, Nie Tian still didn't know what the 9 emperors represented. Therefore, he was very curious. Zhao Zi nodded and said, "The 9 emperors represent the Red Lunar Divine Palace in charge of the Heaven Realm. They are the representatives of the Divine Palace in this plane. The Red Lunar Divine Palace will allow the 9 emperors to reach the peak of this plane and provide protection for the 9 emperors. However, the 9 emperors cannot enter the upper domains." "Why?" Nie Tian was slightly stunned. He couldn't help but be surprised. "This," Zhao Zi laughed and said, "every 300 years or so, the Red Lunar Divine Palace will choose the most talented people from the plane to enter the domain. These people are chosen by the 9 emperors, and the 9 emperors cannot choose themselves." Nie Tian frowned and nodded slightly. He immediately understood. If the 9 emperors could enter the domain, they would definitely choose him. How could the others have a chance? Because of this, the Snow Emperor desperately wanted to advance to the godly state and enter the domain with his own strength. However, he didn't know what the essence of the godly state was. No matter how talented he was, without the power of spirit, he couldn't condense the God spark. Everything was in vain. The Frost Emperor, Poison Emperor, and Meow Emperor are still the same. The Frost Emperor will be promoted to the new 9 emperors. Zhao Zi looked at Mao Xianglong. His divine sense moved and found that the latter's strength had improved, far surpassing ordinary peak experts. He immediately realized that Nie Tian must have made her consume the divine pills. Those elixirs were all Zhao Zi's possessions. Nie Tian heard Zhao Zi's words and frowned. He said cold, "No, no." Chapter 1349. Nie Tianling said coldly, directly denying Zhao Zi's words. This made the atmosphere in the hall become strange. Zhao Zi's expression was slightly awkward. If it was an ordinary person who spoke to him like this, he would definitely be furious and might even kill them directly. But Nie Tian was different. He knew Nie Tian's identity. There was a super powerful figure behind him and a super powerful family. Moreover, the palace master seemed to see Nie Tian as the life-saving straw to save the Red Moon Divine Palace. Upon returning to the Red Moon Divine Palace, Zhao Zi learned some things from Qi Yefeng. The Red Moon Divine Palace was already on the verge of collapse. If it couldn't get into the top 6 in the next grand competition of the 12 shrines, it would be removed from the 12 shrines. This was because the Red Moon Divine Palace had been at the bottom 5 times in a row. If it couldn't make a comeback this time, it would be a disaster. Although there were a few good seedlings this time, such as Shui Wushuang and Qian Lusha, it was tantamount to a fool's dream for the Red Moon Divine Palace to rush into the top 6. Zhao Zi didn't know why Qi Yefeng was so confident in Yetian. Perhaps he didn't understand what the divine demon nascent embryo meant. In short, Yetian was an extremely important figure to the Red Moon Divine Palace. They couldn't afford to lose him. Therefore, Zhao Zi had to consider his words. Mr. Yetian, do you think there is anything wrong with my appointment? Zhao Zi calmed down and looked at Yetian. Yetian nodded and said coldly, Frost Empress will no longer be one of the 9 emperors. She will enter the territory with me. Becoming one of the 9 emperors meant that one couldn't enter the territory. Therefore, Yetian wouldn't let Frost Empress continue to be one of the 9 emperors. This, Zhao Zi frowned, and his expression became even more awkward. He didn't expect Yetian to be so overbearing. At this moment, Yetian had a cold expression on his face as he observed Zhao Zi's reaction. He could tell that Zhao Zi was very accommodating to him, as if he was worried about something. Impudent. At that moment, Thousand Flowing Kill suddenly stood up and glared at Yetian, bellowing, The 9 emperors are appointed by the adjudicators. Who do you think you are, daring to question Lord Zhao's decision? Thousand Flowing Kill stared at Yetian, his killing intent surging. Yetian was not afraid in the slightest. Instead, he smiled playfully and said indifferently, I am questioning Lord Zhao's decision. Lord Zhao hasn't said anything yet, so why are you barking here? Yetian, you Qian Flowing Kill was displeased. He didn't expect Yetian to be so arrogant as to call him a dog. Thousand Streams of Death, I know you want revenge, but don't make it so obvious. Yetian smiled faintly and said, Perhaps you don't know yet, but I'm also going to enter the Domain Realm, and I'm going to join the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. If you want revenge, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. Thousand Flowing Kill's eyes narrowed as he stared at Zhao Zi, asking in shock, Lord Zhao, is what he said true? Yes. Zhao Zi nodded slightly and said, This seed has already reported this matter to Lord Palace Lord, and he has agreed. Why? Thousand Flowing Kill was stunned. He roared in anger as if he had gone mad. Yetian was going to join the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. To him, this was definitely bad news. As long as Yetian became a member of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, he couldn't kill him as he pleased. The Crimson Moon Divine Palace had a rule that forbade internal strife, unless Yetian was willing to fight to the death with him. Thousand Flowing Kill calmed down. At this moment, Vincent, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. He hasn't joined the Crimson Moon Divine Palace yet, right? You still have a chance. For example, you can kill him now. The gloomy voice reverberated in the hall, and it seemed extremely demonic and cold. Yetian's eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but glance at Vincent. The latter's lips actually curled into a provocative smile. Vincent, don't speak anymore. Zhao Zi was enraged. He didn't expect Vincent to provoke Thousand Flowing Kill to attack Yetian. He scolded in a cold manner. Understood. Vincent smiled and said, Lord Zhao, I'll leave the matter of appointing the 9 monarchs to you. I'd better go out and take a look. This is my first time coming to the world of lowly people, so I'm quite curious. With that, Vincent stood up and left the hall. Zhao Zi's expression was gloomy as he thought. Vincent, if your father wasn't an inner elder, how would you dare to speak to this seat like this? It was good that Vincent left. His presence here was troublesome. Although Zhao Zi and the other 2 were adjudicators, Zhao Zi was the main adjudicator. Therefore, he was the one who truly had the power to appoint the 9 monarchs. Thousand Flowing Kill glanced at Zhao Zi and finally sat down. Mr. Yetian, I will consider your words. Zhao Zi let out a long sigh and said, But Frost Empress used to be one of the 9 monarchs. Even if she no longer holds the position of one of the 9 monarchs, she can't enter the territory. Yetian frowned. It seemed that things were more troublesome than he had imagined. Lord Ao Jian, I want to continue staying in the heaven realm. At this time, Frost Empress suddenly stood up and said calmly, Mr. Nietian, if you really want the Frigid Empress to enter the realms, then become an inner sect elder of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. As long as you reach that position, you can bring anyone into the realms. Zhao Zi looked at Nietian and said in a deep voice, Inner elder? Nietian laughed. Zhao Zi was simply fooling him. Red Moon Divine Palace's inner elders all had the strength of High God. Nietian hadn't even condensed his godhead yet. He was 3 realms away from High God. By the time he became an inner elder, Frost Empress and the others would have already fallen. All right, after thinking for a while, Nietian finally sighed and said, Frost Empress, I respect your opinion. Nietian knew that Frost Empress didn't want to make things difficult for him. She also wanted to stay in the heaven realm to accompany Chengju. Thank you, Mr. Nietian. Zhao Zi smiled and bowed to express his gratitude. Mr. Zhao, don't be in a hurry to thank me. At this time, Nietian smiled strangely and said, I have no objection if you want Frost Empress to be one of the 9 monarchs. However, the 6 new 9 monarchs must be appointed by me. Nietian, how dare you? Just as Nietian finished speaking, Thousand Flowing Kill abruptly stood up and bellowed, the matter of appointing the 9 emperors as the adjudicators, and you've crossed the line time and time again. Are you looking down on the adjudicators? Looking down on the adjudicators is looking down on the divine palace. Can you bear this crime? Humph. Nietian raised his head and looked at Thousand Flowing Kill. He also stood up and said, Thousand Flowing Kill, I'm not looking down on the adjudicators. I'm looking down on you. As the cold voice fell, it was like a steel needle piercing Thousand Flowing Kill's heart. His whole body suddenly trembled, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Nietian, you are courting death. Suddenly, Thousand Flowing Kill shouted angrily. His whole body's aura surged and directly pressed down on Nietian. Chapter 1350. Boom! Above the divine cold hall, Thousand Flowing Kill's sudden attack shook the entire hall and made it tremble. Nietian's brows sank slightly as he faced the attack of thousands of palm shadows, but his face remained calm. The next moment, endless black flames of nothingness gushed out of his body and devoured all the palm shadows that were crazily pressing down on him. The black flames of nothingness were Nietian's strongest trump card at the moment. Sakura had warned him not to use the Heart of Nothingness, as it would accelerate the berserk state of the Heart of Nothingness. But Nietian couldn't do anything about it, because he was facing a God Realm expert. Thousand Flowing Kill's face darkened as he watched his all-out attack being devoured by Nietian. He was extremely shocked. He didn't expect that Nietian was so strong that he could contend with him head-on. One should know that Thousand Flowing Kill's current strength was close to that of a mid-stage low god. His all-out attack could instantly kill an early-stage low god expert. Could it be that Nietian's strength was stronger than an early-stage low god? That's right, Nietian's current strength was indeed stronger than an early-stage low god. He could already defeat Li Bo a few months ago. Now that his strength had improved, he could contend with Thousand Flowing Kill head-on. Thousand Flowing Kill didn't expect Nietian's strength to be so strange. His eyes flickered and his killing intent intensified. Thousand Flowing Kill, are you crazy? But at this moment, Zhao Zi suddenly stood up and let out a deep roar that shook the entire hall. Nietian meant a lot to the Crimson Lunar Divine Palace. Zhao Zi naturally couldn't just sit back and watch. Lord Zhao, Thousand Flowing Kill was stunned. He couldn't understand why Zhao Zi cared so much about Nietian. Could it be that Nietian and Zhao Zi had some kind of relationship? Sit down, Zhao Zi coldly rebuked. Then, he looked at Nietian and his expression softened. He apologized. Mr. Nietian, are you all right? I'm fine. Nietian faintly smiled and said, Someone is very strong, but if you want to hurt me, you're still a bit lacking. When a merciless mockery entered Thousand Flowing Kill's ears, he almost went crazy. Mr. Nietian, I'm very sorry about what happened just now. I'll leave the remaining 6 martial monarchs to you. Zhao Zi nodded and said. Actually, he didn't care who the 9 thearchs were. If he could do Nie Tian a favor, why wouldn't he do it? Thank you, Lord Zhao. Nie Tian smiled faintly, and then said the names of 6 people: Li Yi, Tang Hao, Yi Lin Yun, Qiu Shan, Chen Jini, Niao Yuan. All right, no problem. Zhao Zi smiled faintly and said, Mr. Nie Tian, please have these 6 people come to the Divine Cold Palace within 3 days. Nie Tian smiled. The 6 people he named were all people who had a close relationship with him, and it was also after careful consideration. The reason why Nie Tian made Li Yi and the others the 9 thearchs was because he wanted them to reach peak Heavenly Emperor strength as soon as possible. Zhao Zi said that after becoming one of the 9 thearchs, the Crimson Moon Divine Palace would let the 9 thearchs reach peak Heavenly Emperor strength. As for how to let them enter the realms in the future, Nie Tian would think of another way. Nie Yuan was a member of Moyang City's Nie clan, an elder of a weak clan in the 3,000 Lesser Worlds. He probably never dreamed that one day he would become one of the 9 thearchs who ruled the Heaven Realm. Currently, these people were already in the Heaven Realm, and Nie Tian would let them rush to the Divine Cold Palace as soon as possible. Han Fei, Zhang Jianqing, Cheng Ju, and the others were already peak Heavenly Emperors, so they didn't need the Crimson Moon Divine Palace to increase their strength. If possible, Nie Tian would bring them into the God-shocking domain. Cold Arch, send someone to get the Poisoned Arch and the Meowed Arch. The new 9 thearchs still have many things to deal with. Zhao Zi smiled faintly and said to Mao Xianglong, Yes. Mao Xianglong nodded respectfully. Zhao Zi heaved a long sigh of relief after the 9 thearchs' matters were settled. Nie Tian's expression was also indifferent, and he had a smile on his face. However, Thousand Flowing Kill's expression was getting darker and darker. However, at this moment, Nie Tian's brows suddenly tightened, and he raised his head to look outside the palace. His figure flickered, and he directly rushed out. What happened? The others were stunned by Nie Tian's sudden action, and they were puzzled. Let's go out and take a look. Zhao Zi was the first to react, and his figure flashed as he followed. At this moment, in the sky above the Divine Cold Palace, a figure stood tall, with a strange smile on his face, and he stared playfully at a huge beast below. That huge beast was 1,000 meters long, and its entire body was sparkling and translucent, as though it was covered in a layer of ice crystals. Its black and white body tumbled in the air, and there were huge dark circles around its eyes, giving off a charmingly naive feeling. On the back of this huge beast stood a beautiful girl, and her face was extremely stubborn. The huge beast and the girl were none other than the Pishio, Aguai, and Nyeyuro, and the person they were facing was Vincent. At this moment, Nyeyuro was already 15 or 16 years old. Her delicate face had lost its childishness, and in its place was the liveliness and beauty of a young girl. Who are you? Nyeyuro's small face was extremely stubborn, and her clear voice rang through the void, and she was very angry. She was originally playing with Aguai, but who knew that Vincent would suddenly appear and hurt Aguai. On Aguai's body, there was a huge wound, and it was bleeding profusely. Interesting. In this lowly plane of existence, I can actually meet a divine beast like the Pishio. Vincent did not seem to hear Nyeyuro's words, and he smiled playfully as he stared greedily at the Pishio. It was obvious that he was very interested in the Pishio. This little girl is not bad either. Her strength and talent are very good, and her looks are even better. As Vincent spoke, his eyes were on Nyeyuro, and his eyes were filled with lust. Scoundrel, this young lady is talking to you. Nyeyuro reproached, and actually stomped her foot. The purple wind jade flow sword was drawn, and she directly charged over towards Vincent. The current her was already at the first level of Heavenly Emperor strength. Of course, this was all thanks to Nie Tian's help. The long sword stabbed out. Countless sword shadows appeared in the void, connecting to form a huge sword net, spreading over towards Vincent. Little girl, your strength is not bad. Unfortunately, meeting this young master, the difference is too great. When Vincent saw Nyairo charging over, the corners of his mouth twitched. He reached out with his palm, and the void immediately shook. A huge handprint appeared, pressing down with a loud bang, directly shattering Nyairo's sword net, turning into a massive pressure, imprisoning Nyairo firmly. Nyairo felt the massive force pressing down and could not help but scream, very shrill. Roar! When the Pishio Agwai saw that Nyairo was restrained, it raised its head to the sky and roared angrily. Its massive body galloped up, and heaven and earth immediately trembled. Dark clouds rolled, and a terrifying aura rolled out, roaring as it charged towards Vincent. The Pishio was an ancient divine beast. The current Agwai had already grown up, and its combat strength was even stronger than rank 9 spirit beasts. Its fleshy body strength was comparable to deity realm martial artists. Little beast, courting death. When Vincent saw the Pishio rush over, the corners of his mouth curled up into a hint of a smile, cold to the extreme. Chapter 1351. In the void, as Vincent's fist blasted down, the momentum of the world changed instantly. A fist shadow condensed from a huge amount of power came crashing down like a mountain. The huge body of the Pishio rolled in the air, and the surrounding space was filled with a terrifying power of ice. The world seemed to be frozen. Boom! Suddenly, with a loud bang, the huge shadow of the fist landed on the Pishio's body. The terrifying power instantly exploded, and the heaven and earth suddenly trembled. A wave of air rushed out in all directions, rolling and whistling like a tsunami and a landslide. Roar! In the next moment, a horrifying roar resounded. The enormous body of the Pishio, Agwai, suddenly froze, and a bloody hole that was dozens of meters wide actually appeared on its back. Blood gushed out like a fountain, dyeing the heavens and the earth red, and it was dripping with blood. Vincent's figure stood in the sky, not moving at all. He just frowned and murmured, "What a beast." It took a punch from me head on, but it didn't die, as expected of an ancient divine beast. He knew that the Pishio in front of him was far from adulthood. If it fully matured, its strength would be comparable to a superior god or even a lord god. Agwai! Nyairo saw that Agwai was seriously injured, and she couldn't help but cry out. Her little face was full of fear, and as her voice fell, a terrible power was released from her body. Endless 7-colored halos were released like ripples, surging in the space. Vincent was caught off guard, and his divine sense trembled, and he was slightly dazed. It was at this moment that Nyairo broke free from his control. Her figure moved, and she flew toward Agwai. Agwai! Nyairo's figure landed on Agwai's body, and she cried out when she saw the terrible wound. Her eyes suddenly became wet. The power of the illusory seal. Vincent frowned slightly, and then immediately came to his senses. A trace of surprise flashed in his eyes, and he seemed very excited. He didn't expect that Nyairo's body still had the terrifying power of the illusory seal. What Nyairo released just now was the power of the 1,000-gem illusory seal. Unfortunately, her strength was too weak, and she couldn't fully exert the power of the 1,000-gem illusory seal. This girl is a little interesting. I want her. The corner of Vincent's mouth twitched. His figure moved, and he waved his hand, grabbing toward Nyairo again. Bastard, you're courting death. At this moment, a thunderous roar suddenly rang out as a silhouette madly rushed over. Amidst the endless black flames, a terrifying sword shadow surged forth. Boom! When the sword shadow landed, it actually shattered the huge palm print in the air. The divine power contained in the palm print spread out and was actually swallowed by the black flames of nothingness. Seeing this scene, Vincent's eyes narrowed. He looked at the newcomer and laughed. The power of the heart of nothingness. Interesting. The newcomer was none other than Nyation. Rower, are you all right? Nyation's figure flashed, appearing beside Nyeyuro as he asked anxiously. Nyeyuro shook her head slightly, then pointed at Ague and said, "Big brother Nyetan." Ave. When Nyetion saw the wound on Ague's body, he couldn't help but shiver. Immediately after, a terrifying sword chi gushed out of his body and forcefully sealed the wound for Ague. Don't worry, Ague is an ancient beast. This kind of injury is nothing to him, Nyetion said in a low voice. Immediately after, he looked at Vincent with killing intent. At the same time, Zhao Zi and the others arrived as well. When they saw the scene in the air, they immediately understood. Zhao Zi didn't know much about Vincent, but he had heard that Vincent's character was improper and that he was evil. When Zhao Zi saw the Pai Xiao in the air, he was stunned for a moment. However, he quickly calmed down and asked in a low voice, "Frigid Emperor, who is that young lady?" "She is the sister of Lord Nyetion." Mao Xianglong nodded his head. His expression was extremely ugly. "Little sister." Zhao Zi's heart sank as he cursed inwardly. After the last time he met Nyetion, he already knew what kind of person Nyetion was. He was definitely not a kind person who would be bullied by others. It would be fine if you don't provoke him, but once you do, he will definitely not let you go. This is bad. Zhao Zi frowned, and his expression was extremely ugly. Nyetion's identity was not ordinary, and Vincent also had some background. His father was one of the 7 inner elders of the Red Moon Divine Palace. That was why he could be so arrogant. At this moment, even more people arrived. Looking at the figure in the sky, all of them had a look of anger on their faces. Qiu Shan, Jean DeBeo, Qiu Ling, and the others all arrived. They leaped into the air and came to Nyetion's side. They all came to the Divine Cold Palace a few months ago and had been in the Divine Cold Palace ever since. "Roer, are you all right?" Among the few figures, one of them appeared in a flash and seemed to be very nervous. "And I jamming. I'm fine." Nyeyuro glanced at the person and forced a smile. When Nyetion asked Han Ling to pick them up, N.I. Zichen and N.I. Jamming were also there, so they came to the Divine Coal Palace with them. "Yo!" At this time, Vincent suddenly laughed and said, "I can't tell that this little girl has such a high status to be able to make so many people care about her." Nyetion took a step forward, his eyes flashing with coldness. "Mr. Nyetion, this little girl is your sister, right?" Vincent felt Nyetion's killing intent, but he was not afraid at all. When he heard how Nyeyuro addressed Nyetion, he laughed and said with a sinister expression, "I have a small request. Mr. Nyetion, please betroth your sister to me. How about it?" Vincent knew of Nyetion's strength, but he did not put the latter in his eyes at all. Moreover, he felt that he was interested in Nyeyuro. This was a great thing for Nyetion, and the latter would definitely agree without hesitation. He was a God Realm martial artist from an upper-class domain, while Nyetion and the others were low-class people from the plane world. They were not on the same level at all. This kind of betrothal, Nyetion had no reason to reject. Vincent's voice was not loud, but every word that fell into Nyetion's ears was akin to a poisonous needle, driving him mad with the urge to kill. "Vincent, you're courting death." Nyetion stood there, his eyes bloodshot, the blood in his body flowing in reverse. His aura erupted, and with a roar, he took a step forward and slashed out with his sword. At this moment, he no longer cared about Vincent's identity as an adjudicator. This person must die. Vincent was taken aback. He hadn't expected that Nyetion would actually dare to attack him. Immediately afterwards, he let out a cold laugh and said, "An ant from a different plane dares to attack me?" Vincent's face darkened, the corner of his mouth twitched. With a flick of his palm, a whirlpool of spirit force appeared. It was his godhead. Almost at the same time, a horrifying howl sounded, like a dragon's roar, reverberating in the sky. Everyone was stunned, looking at the source of the howl. It was N.I. Jamming. Chapter 1352. What's going on? Zhao Zi looked at N.I. Jamming and felt an enormous and boundless energy from the latter's body. His gaze trembled violently, and he revealed extreme fear. At this moment, Nyetion's figure had already rushed out and did not notice N.I. Jamming. Nietion swung his sword. His blood chi and sword intent spread out in the air. The void black flame released a terrifying aura, like a dark cloud, rolling and roaring. The enormous momentum seemed to be able to devour heaven and earth. Vincent stood in midair with the corners of his mouth curling into a cold smile. He did not take Nietion seriously at all. Dying. The next moment, Vincent flipped his palm and directly slapped out. That whirlpool instantly expanded, and the domain of God shrouded the space. Nietion's figure paused slightly in the air, and his attack slowed down a little. Brat, if you dare to attack again, the outcome is only one word: death. Vincent smiled coldly, and a chilly intent flashed across his eyes. His domain of God had already been opened. If Nietion still dared to charge forward, he would be courting death. In the domain of God, Nietion's speed and attack were suppressed. But his figure still did not stop, and he still charged forward madly. Boom! The blood-colored sword shadow whizzed out and pressed down on Vincent. Even the domain of God shook a little. Brat, I admit that your strength far exceeds a peak Heavenly Emperor expert. Even an early-stage low-god expert might not be your match. But it's a pity that the person you've met is me. The corners of Vincent's mouth curled into a trace of coldness. As his big hand slapped down, a dark green divine power appeared and bloomed in the air, forming a giant wooden palm print. Rumble! Under the giant wooden palm print, Nietion's sword shadow collapsed with a loud bang and dissipated. His strength was still a little weak and could not contend with Vincent head-on. Vincent had the strength of a mid-stage low god. His combat strength was far more powerful than the 1,000-flow kill. With one palm, he vowed to exterminate Nietion. But at this moment, Nietion had a fearless look. Instead, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly and revealed a strange smile. He muttered, "Nietio, this is the time." Yes. Following that, a voice was heard as a crimson figure appeared out of thin air. It turned into a ball of blazing flames and surged forward. Bang! With a muffled sound, the blazing flames pierced through the giant wooden handprint in the air and shot towards Wilson. This sudden change caused Vincent's gaze to shake, and he couldn't help but tremble. He wanted to make another move, but it was already too late. In the next moment, the blazing flames blasted over, and Wilson's figure was directly sent flying, letting out a shrill scream. When the people on the ground saw the scene in the sky, their eyes couldn't help but tremble. They were astonished, shocked, and in disbelief. Vincent was actually sent flying by Nietion? How is this possible? Zhao Zi and the others were dumbstruck. They could not believe what they were seeing. At the side, 1,000 Flowing Kill's face was even paler. He hadn't expected that even Vincent would lose to Nietion. But in the next moment, Zhao Zi and the others understood that Nietion actually had a helper. Inside the ball of flames, a faint silhouette appeared. God Realm martial artist. Zhao Zi could sense that Nietio was actually a God Realm martial artist, and he couldn't help but exclaim. In the Heaven Realm, a God Realm martial artist actually appeared. This was too strange. At this moment, Nietion stabilized his body. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He wanted to destroy Wilson's physical body. He already knew that the previous slash wouldn't be able to hurt Wilson. Hence, Nietio was the real killer move. After gaining the upper hand in one move, Nietion naturally wanted to grab hold of the opportunity and thoroughly defeat Wilson. Big Brother Nietion. Just at this moment, Nieyuro's voice rang out, sounding extremely panicked. Nietion was slightly startled. Immediately after, he sensed something and exclaimed, "Oh no!" In an instant, Nietion suddenly felt a terrifying dragon chi, causing his entire body to tremble and his expression to change. He suddenly turned around and saw Ni Jiaming's ferocious face. Instantly, his face darkened and he shouted, "Everyone leave!" Ni Jiaming stood in midair. A terrifying dragon chi surged around his body, and his eyes became demonic. In his mind, countless images flashed by. Endless memories surged crazily, causing him to go crazy. A dash! All of a sudden, Enai jamming howled towards the sky. The terrifying sound turned into billowing airwaves and spread throughout the space. Oh no! Witnessing this scene, Nyetion's heart sank. Enai jamming was about to awaken the memories of his past life. However, Nyetion remembered that the Dragon Rebel clan once said that Enai jamming would only awaken the memories of his past life when he was 16 years old. There was still more than half a year before he turned 16 years old. Why would his memories suddenly awaken? Did something happen to him? Nyetion frowned and gestured for everyone to leave. He had missed the opportunity to calm Enai jamming down. At the moment, he could no longer prevent Enai jamming's memories from awakening. Enai jamming must have been provoked by Vincent's words just now. Nyetion reacted immediately. He frowned, and his face was frighteningly gloomy. In fact, he had long known that Enai jamming had feelings for Nyeyuro, but he had never pointed it out. Vincent's words had enraged Enai jamming and triggered the awakening of the memories of his past life. Enai jamming had experienced a brief awakening of his memories before. At that time, he had to rely on Nyetion to stabilize his memories. Moreover, Nyetion knew that once Enai jamming's memories were awakened, the vanishing shadow inhibition in his body would break out completely. That would be the day of his death. At this moment, Enai jamming let out another angry roar. His entire body was like a wild beast, surging with a terrifying aura. The extremely violent Enai jamming's inverse dragon aura spread in the air and spread thousands of meters away. Enai jamming's aura skyrocketed crazily. His strength rose steadily and reached the peak of Heaven Emperor in an instant. Previously, his strength had always been at the Heaven Realm. In order to suppress the vanishing shadow inhibition, his strength did not dare to increase. How is this possible? Zhao Zi sensed the aura on Enai jamming's body and was extremely shocked. He clearly felt that the power in Enai jamming's body was extremely huge. It was something he had never seen in his life. It seemed that even an expert like the Crimson Moon Palace Master could not compare to it. Who is this person? How can there be such a terrifying power hidden in his body? Zhao Zi was shocked, and his body was trembling. "Brat, die for this young master." All of a sudden, a vicious voice echoed out from behind Nyetion. Vincent dashed towards Nyetion, his enormous aura surging in the air. He had just been injured by Nyetion and Nyechio. Now that he had recovered, he wanted to kill Nyetion at all costs. Nyetion and Nyechio had been paying attention to Enai jamming. They did not expect Vincent to attack at this time. When they reacted and wanted to make a move, it was already too late. Scram! At the critical moment, Enai jamming's voice was suddenly heard. The opposing dragon energy around him actually condensed into a dark demonic dragon. Its huge body was boundlessly huge. It suddenly rolled and charged towards Wilson. Chapter 1353. In the void, a dark demonic dragon condensed around Enai jamming's body. The massive body of the demonic dragon rolled and actually blasted Wilson away. How is this possible? On the ground, Zhao Zi and the others trembled violently when they saw this scene. Disbelief was written all over their faces. Enai jamming was just a celestial realm warrior a moment ago. But in the blink of an eye, his strength had skyrocketed and he had blasted Vincent away. "Lord Zhao, what's going on?" Thousand Flowing Kill had no time to care about Vincent's life or death. He looked at the dark demonic dragon in the sky and asked in horror. Zhao Zi gulped, and his face was equally horrified. He said in a daze, He seems to be awakening a power in his body. This power is too terrifying. I can't resist it at all." Boom, boom, boom. Just as Zhao Zi spoke, the dark demon dragon went berserk. Its huge body tumbled in the air, and waves of terrifying dragon chi wreaked havoc in the space. The heavens and the earth trembled, and the space seemed like it was going to collapse in the next moment. Oh no! Nyetion's heart skipped a beat when he saw this scene. Enai jamming was the reincarnation of the mystical dragon demon saint. He was most likely an expert at the pinnacle of the divine state in his previous life. If the power in his body was completely awakened, it would be a piece of cake for him to destroy this world. What was more terrifying was that Jiaming was in a berserk state and seemed unable to control himself. Tian looked back at Vincent, who was blasted away by the dark demonic dragon, and couldn't help but gasp. At this moment, Vincent's entire body was drenched in blood and badly mutilated, and he was in an extremely sorry state. He didn't have the arrogant and domineering attitude from before any longer, and he had a pitiable appearance. The dark demonic dragon was too powerful. Just the pressure of its aura alone had almost destroyed a mid-stage low-god expert. Tian knew that this was definitely not the limit of Jiaming's strength. It seemed that the dark demonic dragon had just awakened. I have to stop him. Tian's eyes suddenly darkened, and an extremely determined look emerged in his eyes. If Jiaming's power was completely awakened, not only would he die, the entire Divine Frost City or even the entire Heaven Realm might be implicated. Tian didn't have a clear understanding of the strength of the peak of the immortal state, but he felt that it should be easy for a peak supreme god to destroy a plain world. With this thought in mind, Tian didn't dare to delay any longer. His body trembled, and the meteor wings appeared on his back. "Sir, what are you doing?" Seeing Tian's actions, Xiao, who was by the side, was startled. He immediately reacted. His face changed, and his expression became sluggish. Xiao reacted. Tian actually wanted to stop Jianming. "Xiao, leave first." Tian let out a low roar, after which the power of the stars gushed out from his body and condensed into an astral shield. With a flap of his wings, he dashed towards Jianming. Jianming had already gone completely mad, and he roared furiously like a savage, ferocious beast. His face was savage and terrifying, and his entire body emitted a terrifying aura. Boom! Tian's figure moved, and he dashed towards Jianming. However, when he was 1,000 meters away from Jianming, he felt the pressure of an enormous and boundless aura, which he couldn't bear. With a loud bang, the shield around him shattered. Tian let out a muffled groan, and he was sent flying, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Tian, seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but exclaim. Thousand Flowing Kill's face was gloomy, and he laughed sinisterly. "Tian, even Vincent can't bear the pressure of that kid's aura, and you still dare to rush forward? Aren't you courting death?" "Shut up." Before he finished speaking, Zhao Zi scolded coldly and glared at him. Zhao Zi understood that Tian wanted to stop the awakening of the power in Jianming's body. He didn't know what the power in Jianming's body was, but it was definitely a power that could destroy heaven and earth. Thinking of this, Zhao Zi stomped his feet, and his figure dashed over. He had to help Tian. Tian's figure stabilized, and his face was pale and bloodless. His expression was even more horrified. Jianming's power was too terrifying, and Tian couldn't even bear the pressure of the former's aura. Moreover, Tian sensed that the aura around Jianming was still skyrocketing. If it continued, he might really rush to the peak of the immortal state. Phew! Tian let out a long breath, and his complexion turned slightly better. "Mr. Tian." At this time, Zhao Zi's figure appeared next to Tian, and he asked in a deep voice, "Is this person? How can there be such a terrifying power in his body?" "He is the reincarnation of the ancient demon saint, and he is awakening the memory of his previous life." Tian nodded and said, "The reincarnation of the ancient demon saint." Zhao Zi was stunned, and he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. The strength of the ancient demon saint was at least at the same level as those old monsters in the territory. It was definitely an expert at the peak of the immortal state. No wonder there was such a terrifying power in his body. "Mr. Zhao, we have to stop him from awakening his memory." Tian's face was solemn, and he said heavily, "Okay." Zhao Zi nodded and said, "I will break through his aura for you. and let you get close to him. Zhao Zi guessed that since Nie Tian wanted to get close to Ni Jianming, he must have a way to calm the latter down. Okay, Nie Tian agreed, and the wings on his back moved, and he turned into a black light and flew over. Zhao Zi followed behind him, and he opened the god's domain around him and pressed towards Ni Jianming. Boom, boom, boom. The next moment, two terrifying forces collided, and a terrifying roar sounded in the air. Dark clouds rolled between heaven and earth, and the sky became dark, as if it was the end of the world. Zhao Zi was indeed a middle deity expert, and his strength was far better than Vincent's. He used the god's domain to break through the dragon Qi around Ni Jianming. This is a good chance. Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he dashed towards Ni Jianming. Get lost. However, at this moment, Ni Jianming had already gone mad. His eyes were bloodshot, and his eyes were full of ferocity. He roared and slapped his palm. Seeing this, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he moved his body a few hundred meters to the side and barely avoided the huge palm power. However, he was still affected by the palm power. He felt a terrifying force rushing towards him, and he wanted to resist, but he couldn't control his body, and he was sent flying away. Go to hell. Immediately, Ni Jianming's eyes revealed a murderous look, and he slapped his palm. A huge force came crashing down towards Nie Tian. Mr. Nie Tian, Zhao Zi was stunned when he saw this scene. He was so scared that his face turned pale, and his forehead was dripping with cold sweat. Ni Jianming's strength was too strong. When this palm fell, even he couldn't withstand it, let alone Nie Tian. There was no doubt that if Ni Jianming's palm hit Nie Tian, the latter would definitely die. The sudden scene made everyone's heart tighten, and they looked at the sky in horror. Kill him, kill him, kill him. Flowing kill screamed in his heart, and his eyes became fiery. It was as if he could already see the scene of Nie Tian being killed with one palm. Chapter 1354. At the critical moment, Nie Euro released a 7-colored halo that flowed in the air like a light wave. At this moment, Ni Jianming was affected by the power of the phantom seal. He screamed, and the huge handprint in the air suddenly disappeared. When Nie Tian felt the pressure on his body dissipate and his body return to normal, he couldn't help but look at Nie Euro in astonishment. It seemed that Nie Euro's 1,000-gem phantom seal had a certain effect on Ni Jianming. Roar, follow me. Having no time to think, Nie Tian roared in a low voice, before charging towards Ni Jianming once again. Nie Euro's figure was just as fast as Nie Tian's. She followed closely behind Nie Tian, her body constantly releasing 7-colored light. Ni Jianming was affected by the power of the phantom seal. He held his head with both hands and screamed. Absolute confinement. Nie Tian's figure came to a place about 100 meters away from Ni Jianming. His eyes flickered and the starry eye opened. At the same time, holographic divine runes filled the air and a huge spiritual deterrent shrouded Ni Jianming. Ni Jianming felt his divine sense being attacked, and he let out a shrill cry. He raised his head abruptly, and his eyes were scarlet red, sinister, and ferocious to the extreme. In the next moment, he suddenly released a huge wave of renegade dragon Qi around him. In the void above, the dark demon dragon was summoned and came crashing down. Nie Tian looked up and saw the colossal creature over his head. He had an ominous feeling. Ni Jianming, don't hurt brother Nie Tian. At this moment, Nie Euro's figure appeared like a hurricane and shouted anxiously. Ni Jianming's eyes trembled violently. He seemed to recognize the face in front of him, and his red eyes calmed down in an instant. Roar! The dark demonic dragon threw its head back and roared furiously. Its body tumbled and charged into the void. Boom! A thunderous explosion rang out in the sky, tens of thousands of meters away. A space-time crack that was several thousand meters wide appeared in the sky. From afar, the sky seemed to be torn apart. A terrible space-time storm surged out, and the world suddenly fell into darkness. The dark demonic dragon's massive body was enveloped by the space-time storm. In the blink of an eye, it was torn to shreds, and the violent dragon renegade energy surged into the space-time rift. At the same time, Enai Jiaming's body trembled and he fainted. Nie Tian's figure moved, and he hugged Enai Jiaming. He lifted his head to look at the crack in the sky, and his heart was filled with shock. A casual strike from the tenebrous demonic dragon tore through the sky. Such power was unimaginable. If the tenebrous demonic dragon had attacked just now, Nie Tian wouldn't have survived even if he had 10 lives. Everyone looked up at the space-time rift in the sky, their faces filled with shock. After a long time, the space-time rift gradually closed up under the operation of the space-time laws and disappeared. Brother Nie Tian, is Enai Jiaming all right? At this moment, Nie Yuro walked over and asked anxiously. He should be fine. Nie Tian heaved a sigh of relief and said lightly. He could sense that Enai Jiaming's aura was still there, and it was very strong. However, Nie Tian was a little puzzled by what had just happened. The tenebrous demonic dragon had the chance to kill him, but it suddenly stopped. Nie Yuro's appearance seemed to have awakened Enai Jiaming instantly. The tenebrous demonic dragon created the space-time rift, and it was clearly self-destructing. Enai Jiaming would rather hurt himself than hurt Ro-Air, Nie Tian said in his heart. He couldn't help but look at Nie Yuro, and his lips curled into a smile. Nie Tian landed with Enai Jiaming, and without caring about the others, he went straight to a small courtyard. Nie Tian, how is Jiaming? Enai Zi-chun walked over at this moment, looking worried. She had seen everything that had happened just now. If it wasn't for Nie Tian, Enai Jiaming would definitely have died. I'm not sure about his current situation. You should come and take a look. Nie Tian nodded slightly, sent Enai Jiaming to the room, and then waited outside the room. At this moment, Jean DeBeo, Qiu Shan, and the others had arrived outside the small courtyard. They were relieved to see that Nie Tian was fine. I hope this bastard is fine. Nie Yuro's little face was worried, and she finally muttered. Ro-Air, this bastard seems to care a lot about you. Nie Tian heard Nie Yuro's words and couldn't help but laugh. Enai Jiaming's memory had suddenly awakened because Vincent had said some blasphemous words to Nie Yuro. He was able to regain his composure later because of Nie Yuro's appearance. From this, it could be seen that Enai Jiaming cared a lot about Nie Yuro. Nie Tian knew that during the time Nie Yuro and the others were in the Sumi world, Enai Zi-chun and Enai Jiaming had been with them. It wasn't strange for a young man and a young woman to develop feelings for each other after being together for a long time. As for Nie Yuro saying that she would marry Nie Tian when she grew up, it was just child's talk. Nie Tian had never taken seriously. If Nie Yuro could be with Enai Jiaming, it would definitely be a good thing. After a while, Enai Zi-chun walked out of the room, but her expression was very strange. Sister Zi-chun, is Enai Jiaming okay? Nie Yuro was the most nervous and stepped forward to ask. He's fine. Enai Zi-chun frowned and forced a smile. Go in and see him. Nie Yuro nodded and went straight into the room. After confirming that Enai Jiaming was fine, Nie Tian let out a long sigh of relief. But he could see that Enai Zi-chun seemed to have something to say, so he said, Miss Zi-chun, let's talk in private. There were too many people here, so it wasn't strange that Enai Zi-chun had something to say. Nie Tian smiled faintly and let Jean DeBeo and Qiu Shan leave first. Not long after, Nie Tian and Enai Zi-chun came to a separate room. Miss Zi-chun, did something happen to Enai Jiaming? Nie Tian didn't beat around the bush and asked directly. Yes, Jiaming's current situation is indeed a bit strange. Enai Zi-chun nodded and said with a solemn and complicated expression, I found out that the power of the absolute shadow prohibition in his body seems to have weakened a lot. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he suddenly fell into deep thought. The people of the Dragon Rebel clan all had the absolute shadow prohibition in their bodies. Because of the existence of this prohibition, the people of the Dragon Rebel clan didn't dare to increase their strength, because once their strength increased, the power of the prohibition would also become stronger. So Ni Chun and Ni jamming strength were only in the celestial realm. Without the absolute shadow prohibition, with their talent, they could at least step into the celestial emperor realm. Is it the power of the 1,000-gem phantom seal? Tian murmured with a frown. He had seen that Ni jamming was affected by the 1,000-gem phantom seal and was briefly awake. It seemed that the 1,000-gem phantom seal had some kind of influence on him. Thinking of this, Tian basically concluded that it was the power of the 1,000-gem phantom seal that weakened the absolute shadow prohibition in Ni jamming's body. Besides that, what else? Tian couldn't help but continue to ask when he saw Ni Chun lowering his head in silence. It seems. Ni Chun's eyes flickered. He hesitated, but finally said, "It seems that some of Jiaming's memories have been awakened this time." After he calmed down, those awakened memories weren't sealed. Just now, he kept shouting things like Dragon Spring Veins and World Origin. It's very strange. Chapter 1355. In the room, Tian's eyes darkened and his expression froze at the mention of the vein of Dragon Spring. Oh, and Chun was surprised by Tian's reaction and asked, "You know about the vein of Dragon Spring?" "Yes." Tian nodded and said, "The vein of Dragon Spring was the most precious treasure of the divine dragon tribe in the olden times. The divine dragon tribe was born from the vein of Dragon Spring. But hundreds of thousands of years ago, the vein of Dragon Spring disappeared. The divine dragon tribe declined and was finally destroyed by the dragon rebel tribe. Tian didn't hide anything and didn't mind." "I see." And Zichen frowned and said, "It seems that the vein of Dragon Spring is related to the survival of the dragon tribe. Why did Jiaming mention it when he was in a coma?" "I find it strange, too." Tian's expression was also complicated. He had a guess in his mind. Since the divine dragon tribe was destroyed by the dragon rebel tribe, it was very likely that the vein of Dragon Spring was stolen by the dragon rebel tribe. "Are you suspecting that Lord Monster Saint took the vein of Dragon Spring?" And Zichen's eyes flashed, and she asked directly. "Yes." Tian nodded and didn't hide anything. He said directly, "Miss Zichen, do you know about the Guardian family?" "How do you know about the Guardian family?" And Zichen's eyes trembled, and she asked. Tian was surprised, and then smiled. "It seems that you also know about the Guardian family. Tell me about it." Zichen frowned and became silent, as if she was thinking about something. "Miss Zichen, I am not the fated one in your prophecy, but I have a connection with the dragon tribe. We can't hide what the dragon rebel tribe did back then. Why don't you tell us honestly? Maybe we can find a solution." Tian said sincerely, looking at Zichen. Zichen looked up at Tian and hesitated for a long time. Finally, she said, "The Guardian family is a mysterious organization founded by Lord Monster Saint hundreds of thousands of years ago. Its mission is to protect something very important. Rumor has it that this thing concerns the survival of the world." Tian nodded slightly. Zichen's words were basically the same as what he had heard from the Sword Elder. However, from Zichen's tone, she knew very little about the Guardian family. She did not know what the Guardian family wanted to protect. The Guardian clan was a mysterious and powerful organization. According to the Sword Elder, this organization should be in a different space. Back then, the myriad demon dragon head was a traitor of the Guardian clan. Tian frowned and said inwardly, "The Guardian family. Once I enter the realm verse, I must dig out this organization." He was now 70 to 80% sure that what the Protector family was guarding was the Dragon Spring vein. But even now, Tian still didn't know what the Dragon Spring vein was or what its essence was. Just what kind of thing could give birth to such a powerful life form like the divine dragon race? World source. Suddenly, these words appeared in Tian's mind, causing his face to darken. Just now, Zichen said that Jiaming not only mentioned the Dragon Spring vein, but also the world source when he was unconscious. Then, could the Dragon Spring vein be one of the world source? Tian had read about the world source in ancient books. It was said to be a magical existence that could create a world. The space-time crystal in his hand that had merged with the divine demon origin embryo might be a fragment of the space-time origin. A small fragment could directly devour the space-time apocalypse, which showed how powerful the world source was. Since the dragon spring vein could give birth to the divine dragon race, its power was unimaginable. It was very likely that it was one of the world source. However, regarding the world source, Nyetion only knew of its existence and nothing else. The protector family, the dragon spring vein, the world source, these things were all mysteries which made Nyetion feel that the world was endless. Miss Zichun, what else did Ni Jiaming say when he was unconscious? Nyetion continued to ask. Ni Zichun thought for a moment and basically repeated what Ni Jiaming said. Nyetion was confused and didn't find any information that interested him. Apart from this, everything else about Ni Jiaming is normal. Nyetion nodded slightly. It's not normal. Ni Zichin's small face was full of worry and her eyes were a little complicated. She frowned and said, Jiaming's strength seems to have increased, and there is no sign of it disappearing. Huh? Nyetion was stunned and couldn't help but exclaim, What do you mean? He knew that when Ni Jiaming awakened, his strength would also increase. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to send Vincent flying. But previously, when Ni Jiaming returned to normal, his strength would return to its original level. If his strength didn't decline this time, it would be really terrifying. Jiaming's strength seems to be much stronger than before. I can't determine his current strength. Ni Zichun frowned and said in a deep voice. She couldn't determine whether this was a good thing or a bad thing for Ni Jiaming. This, Nyetion gasped, and his whole body stiffened for a few seconds. The strength that Ni Jiaming displayed before was definitely at the level of an intermediate deity or even an upper deity. If his strength didn't decline, wouldn't he already have the strength of an upper deity? This was too terrifying. Nyetion, are you okay? Ni Zichun couldn't help but ask when she saw Nyetion's reaction. She didn't know the strength of the godly state and didn't know much about it, so she didn't know what Nyetion was thinking. I want to see Ni Jiaming. Nyetion stood up and said in a deep voice. Okay. Ni Zichun didn't know what happened, but she saw that Nyetion's reaction wasn't right. She thought that something had happened to Ni Jiaming, so she agreed and became nervous. Nyetion and Ni Zichun walked out of the room and went directly to the room where Ni Zichun was. When they entered the room, Nyeyuro was taking care of Ni Jiaming, who hadn't woken up yet. Brother Nyeton, sister Ni Zichun, you're here. Nyeyuro thought that Nyetion and Ni Zichun had come to see Ni Jiaming. She smiled faintly and said with some pride, Ni Jiaming called my name when he was unconscious. Rower, did he say anything else? Nyetion looked at Nyeyuro and asked solemnly. No. Nyeyuro shook her head and noticed that Nyetion's mood wasn't right. She couldn't help but frown and asked, Brother Nyetion, did something happen to Ni Jiaming? It's nothing. Nyetion motioned for Nyeyuro not to be nervous. He took a step forward and came to Ni Jiaming's side. He activated the holographic divine glyphs and carefully sensed the aura in Ni Jiaming's body. After a while, Nyetion let out a long breath, but his face was extremely shocked. Ni Zichun was right. Ni Jiaming's strength had indeed not declined. Realizing this, Nyetion's whole body stiffened. With his current knowledge, he couldn't determine what Ni Jiaming's current strength was. Get Zhao Zi to come and take a look. After a while, Nyetion finally reacted and walked out of the room. Chapter 1356. After a while, Nyetion went to look for Zhao Zi. This. In the room, Zhao Zi gasped and stared at Ni Jiaming in astonishment. He opened his mouth wide, but couldn't say a word for a long time. Lord Zhao, what is the strength of my friend now? Nyetion asked in surprise when he saw Zhao Zi's unusual reaction. I can't sense it. Zhao Zi gulped and said, This lord is definitely above the mid-stage of the deity stage, and may even be a high god. Indeed, although Nyetion had expected this, he was still shocked when he heard it from Zhao Zi. Ni Jiaming's strength had actually increased to the divine state, and he even reached the mid-stage or high god level. This was too terrifying. Nye Tian stood still for a long time before he finally reacted. Thinking of the huge spatial rift that was created when the dark demonic dragon self-destructed, Nye Tian still had some lingering fear. Lord Zhao, thank you very much. Nye Tian became cold and thanked Zhao Zi. He then asked, how is Vincent? Nye Tian didn't have a good impression of Vincent. He just wanted to make sure that Vincent wouldn't do anything out of line again. He's badly injured and will probably need at least a few months to recover. Zhao Zi smiled bitterly and said with some guilt on his face, Vincent is an eccentric person and doesn't know the severity of his actions. If he has done anything wrong, please forgive him, Mr. Nye Tian. Nye Tian laughed, but didn't say anything. Nye Tian wouldn't pursue what happened before, but if Vincent dared to do anything wrong again, Nye Tian wouldn't let him live. Nye Tian was confident that even if he hadn't advanced to the divine state, he could still kill Vincent with Nye Chio's strength. If it wasn't for Ni jamming suddenly going berserk, he would have destroyed Vincent's body. Zhao Zi immediately took his leave and left the room. Nye Tian sensed for a while and made sure that Ni jamming's aura was stable. He then left. Ni jamming was in a coma, and no one knew when he would wake up. Nye Tian had a question in his heart. If Ni jamming's strength did not decline, would his awakened memories not be sealed? In that case, Ni jamming would really become the mysterious dragon demon saint. Thinking of this, Nye Tian's heart couldn't help but tremble, and his expression changed. 3 days later, Nye Tian summoned Li Yi, Tang Hao, and the others. The new 9 emperors would be officially established. A group of people had gathered in the Divine Cold Palace. Nye Tian walked into the main hall. He also wanted to join in the fun on such an important day. Teacher, Li Tang Hao stood behind Nye Tian and respectfully called out, Sir. Yi Lin Yun and Xiao Shan bowed slightly to Nye Tian, their faces filled with excitement. They never thought that one day they would be able to come to the Heaven Realm and become the legendary 9 emperors. Nye Tian. When Shunjini saw Nye Tian again, his face was filled with sorrow and joy. Nye, Mr. Nye. Nye Wenyuan saw Nye Tian walking over, and his face was filled with excitement. He didn't know how to address Nye Tian. Great Elder, you could just call me Nye Tian. Nye Tian smiled faintly, his expression calm. Nye Tian. Nye Wenyuan's voice trembled as he stammered. At that moment, he felt like he was dreaming. Everything was so unreal. A few years ago, the family head who was called Trash, the youth who was ridiculed by the Mo family, was now standing at the peak of the entire plane world. And he, an elder of a third-rate family in a third-rate empire in the lower plane world, was actually going to be called the 9 emperors of the Heaven Realm. Nye Wenyuan looked at everything in the Divine Cold Palace with a dazed expression. That expression seemed to be saying, am I really not dreaming? Great Elder, the Nye family will be relying on you in the future. Nye Tian looked at Nye Wenyuan and smiled faintly. When he reincarnated, the Nye family was in a precarious situation. At that time, he said that the Nye family would definitely rise because of him. And now he had done it. The ruined family of the third-rate city would become the super family of the entire Heaven Realm. Nye Wenyuan was so excited that he didn't know what to say and just nodded. A moment later, Zhao Zi and the other 2 adjudicators appeared. When Zhao Zi saw Li Yi and the others, he realized that the 6 people Nye Tian chose were actually so weak. Zhao Zi couldn't help but look at Nye Tian and understood that Nye Tian clearly wanted to use the power of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace to raise the strength of the 6 people in front of him to the peak of Heavenly Emperor. Nye Tian, are these the 6 emperors you chose? Thousand Flowing Kill's face sank when he saw Li Yi and the others, and he asked Nye Tian coldly, Are you not satisfied? Nye Tianling laughed, extremely provocative. Anyway, it didn't matter whether Thousand Flowing Kill was satisfied or not. Nye Tian wouldn't care about his attitude. The 9 emperors are people who stand at the peak of the Heaven Realm. The strongest among them has only just stepped into the Heavenly Emperor realm. Are you looking down on the adjudicators and the Crimson Moon Divine Palace by finding these people to be the 9 emperors? Thousand Flowing Kill's face was gloomy, and he looked at Li Yi and the others with disdain. The expressions of Li Yi and the others turned a little ugly. After all, they were indeed very weak. Thousand Flowing Kill, since Lord Zhao asked me to appoint the new 6 emperors, then I have the right to choose anyone. Nie Tianling looked at Thousand Flowing Kill coldly and said solemnly, "If you're not satisfied with my choice, you can tell Lord Zhao. There's no need to bark here." Nie Tian, Thousand Flowing Kill frowned, and his face directly turned the color of an eggplant, as ugly as one could get. He didn't expect that Nie Tian would actually use Zhao Zi to suppress him. Thousand Flowing Kill, don't say any more. Zhao Zi finally spoke up. He glared at Thousand Flowing Kill cold and said, "These 6 people that Mr. Nie Tian appointed might be a little weak, but their talent is not bad. As long as they consume the heavenly essence God pill that Lord Palace Lord personally refined, their strength will be able to reach the peak of Heavenly Emperor within 3 months. My lord, I just feel that using the heavenly essence God pill on these trash is really a reckless waste of God's gift." Thousand Flowing Kill suddenly raised his head and said with a look of contempt, "Slap." Just as Thousand Flowing Kill's voice had yet to fade, a palm force suddenly flashed past in the air. Following that, a crisp sound echoed out. Half of Thousand Flowing Kill's face immediately became red and swollen. The sudden sound made everyone stupefied, becoming stunned in unison. A slap. Everyone immediately reacted. The sound just now was actually a slap. Furthermore, it was slapped on Thousand Flowing Kill's face. The person who made the move was precisely Nie Tian. Thousand Flowing Kill himself was also stunned for a moment, only coming back to his senses after a good few seconds. His gaze suddenly trembled, and his expression was grim until it was practically dripping water. He never would have thought that Nie Tian actually dared to slap him in public. Who was he? He was a deity realm martial artist, a genius of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. This sort of humiliation, how could he tolerate it? Chapter 1357. In the main hall, everyone could feel the immense killing intent from Thousand Flowing Kill. Their hearts leaped to their throats, and they were extremely nervous. No one had expected that Nie Tian would suddenly slap Thousand Flowing Kill. Even though it wasn't a killing move, it was still a great humiliation. No matter what, Thousand Flowing Kill was a God Realm martial artist and a member of the Red Moon Divine Palace, with the identity of an adjudicator. Wasn't Nie Tian going a little overboard? Thousand Flowing Kill, are you very angry? Nie Tian looked at Thousand Flowing Kills, who was brimming with killing intent, with a mocking look on his face, and said indifferently, "You are a God Realm martial artist, but facing me, a Heavenly Emperor martial artist, you are humiliated by me in public, yet you dare not make a move. Tell me, aren't you worse than trash?" The indifferent voice sounded, but it carried a deeper humiliation. Nie Tian could see that Thousand Flowing Kill did not dare to make a move at this moment, because the latter knew that he was not Nie Tian's match. Thousand Flowing Kill had seen the battle between Nie Tian and Vincent, and even Vincent's body was almost destroyed by Nie Tian. His strength was far inferior to Vincent, so how would he dare to make a move against Nie Tian? In fact, Thousand Flowing Kill was not afraid of Nie Tian, but Nie Qiu, who was hidden in Nie Tian's body. Until now, he still had not figured out the relationship between Nie Tian and Nie Qiu. Thousand Flowing Kill, since you don't dare to make a move, then shut up and stop shouting. Nie Tianling looked at Thousand Flowing Kill coldly and growled. His voice was like thunder, resounding in the main hall. Every word of Nie Tian's was like a crisp slap on Thousand Flowing Kill's face. After Nie Tian finished speaking, he did not look at Thousand Flowing Kill, but said to Zhao Zi, "Lord Zhao, let's continue." Zhao Zi was stunned and only reacted after a long time and nodded in shock. The shock that Nie Tian gave Zhao Zi was too great. The latter did not expect that Nie Tian, who looked modest and gentle on the surface, would be so domineering when angered. I must never offend this person in the future. Zhao Zi glanced at Nie Tian with lingering fear and said in his heart. Next, Zhao Zi gave the heavenly essence god pills to Li Yi and the others. At the same time, she gave Mao Xianglong and the others new 9 emperor tokens. From this moment onwards, there were 9 new emperors in the divine realm of the heaven realm. A new era had begun in the heaven realm, and it was the era of the Frost Emperor. Everyone was extremely happy, and only Thousand Flow Killer's expression was extremely gloomy. He frequently glanced at Nie Tian, and he wished for nothing more than to burn Nie Tian's bones and scatter the dust. Nie Tian. A moment later, just as the crowd was about to disperse, Thousand Flowing Kill's voice suddenly rang out. Everyone was slightly taken aback and looked at Thousand Flowing Kill. What? Nie Tian turned around and sneered. He said mockingly, "Do you think the slap just now wasn't loud enough?" Thousand Flowing Kill's eyes trembled, and his body became even colder. He said in a low voice, "You kill my teacher, Lord Snow Emperor. So what?" Nie Tian raised his brows and said arrogantly, "With your current strength, do you want revenge?" Back then in the divine realm of the heaven realm, Nie Tian's prestige far surpassed Thousand Flowing Kills. More than 100 years had passed. Thousand Flowing Kill cultivated in the god awakening domain and finally condensed his godhead, advancing to the deity realm. But unfortunately, after Nie Tian was reborn, he also reached the peak of the heavenly emperor realm. In addition to the various strange powers in his body, he still firmly suppressed Thousand Flowing Kill. Thousand Flowing Kill was not Nie Tian's match. "I won't kill you, because your life belongs to another person." The corners of Thousand Flowing Kill's mouth curled up, and he smiled coldly. He said, "Before I came, Xue Wushuang asked me to pass a message to you on his behalf." Xue Wushuang. Hearing this name, Nie Tian's brows furrowed slightly, and then he said with a smile, "What message?" Since Thousand Flowing Kill knew everything, Xue Wushuang definitely knew too. Nie Tian estimated that Xue Wushuang's current strength was definitely stronger than Thousand Flowing Kill. Back in the heaven realm, Xue Wushuang far surpassed Thousand Flowing Kill and was even not much weaker than Nie Tian. Now that this person had cultivated in the god awakening domain for more than 100 years, his strength was naturally stronger. More importantly, Nie Tian knew that Xue Wushuang looked like a gentleman on the surface, but was extremely despicable behind his back. This point perfectly inherited the talent of bullying Xue Lingtian. Xue Wushuang knows that you will definitely go to the domain, and he wants to have a life-and-death battle with you. Thousand Flowing Kill smiled coldly, and his eyes revealed killing intent. Life-and-death battle? Nie Tian's gaze turned slightly intent, but then he laughed and said, "A fine life-and-death battle." Xue Wushuang entered the god awakening domain for more than 100 years. With his talent, his current strength is at least middle stage low god, right? If I enter the domain, I'll be peak heavenly emperor at most. Asking me to have a life-and-death battle with him. He really has the cheek to propose it. A deity realm martial artist and a heavenly emperor realm martial artist. Such a request was indeed somewhat shameless. But Xue Wushuang and Nie Tian had the enmity of killing his father. Proposing such a battle was not considered too strange. Nonsense. At this time, Nie Tian had just finished speaking when Zhao Zi rebuked angrily. Looking at Thousand Flowing Kill, he said, "According to what this seat knows, after Xue Wushuang joined the Divine Palace, he only used 20 years' time to condense his divine spark. Currently, his strength is at least late-stage low god. To have a life-and-death battle with a heavenly emperor powerhouse with such strength, isn't this making things difficult for others? 20 years. Xue Wushuang actually only used 20 years to condense his divine spark. When the others heard Zhao Zi's words, they did not have any reaction. They did not have much understanding of divine sparks. But Nie Tian's expression froze all at once, his shock not small. He did not think that Xue Wushuang's talent was actually so terrifying, only using 20 years to condense his divine spark. Nie Tian found out from Yi Qinghai that divine spark was extremely hard to condense. Ordinary martial artists needed over 1,000 years to condense their divine spark. Genius martial artists needed several hundred years. Monstrous-level geniuses needed around 100 years. Like Xue Wushuang, who condensed his divine spark within 20 years. That was a supreme-level monster. It seemed like Xue Wushuang was much more terrifying than Nie Tian imagined. Lord Zhao, this is a matter between Xue Wushuang and Nie Tian. I hope that you don't interfere. Unexpectedly, Thousand Flowing Kill actually shot Zhao Zi a cold glance, not shrinking back in the slightest. Following that, Thousand Flowing Kill looked at Nie Tian, smiled mockingly, and said, Nie Tian, are you scared? Scared? Nie Tian came back to his senses, smiled coldly, and said, I am indeed a little scared, but that doesn't mean that I will refuse. Isn't it just a battle of life and death? Go back and tell Xue Wushuang to wash his neck and wait for me. When I arrive at the astonishing god territory, I will fight with him. His arrogant voice resounded in the hall, sounding extremely domineering. Everyone was stunned. They did not expect Nie Tian to agree so quickly. Although they did not know Xue Wushuang's current strength, they could tell from Zhao Zi's reaction that it must be very terrifying. Nie Tian, you really agree? Thousand Flowing Kill was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted and shouted in joy. Yes, I agree. Nie Tian smiled with a calm expression. Great. Thousand Flowing Kill finally reacted and laughed out loud in excitement, and shouted, Xue Wushuang will definitely wait for you. I hope you won't let him wait for too long. Looking at Thousand Flowing Kill, who was almost crazy, Nie Tian shook his head with a bitter smile, and his face was full of disdain. However, at this moment, Zhao Zi, who was standing to the side, had an ugly expression on his face. He thought to himself, it's over this time. Xue Wushuang and Nie Tian were both important candidates for the Crimson Moon Divine Palace to participate in the grand competition of the 12 Shrines. If the two of them were to have a battle of life and death, it would be bad for the Crimson Moon Divine Palace regardless of the outcome. Chapter 1358. In the Grand Hall, Zhao Zi looked at Nie Tian with a helpless expression. Nie Tian was indeed domineering, but sometimes he was a little too domineering. He dared to take on everything. Zhao Zi knew that Xue Wushuang's strength was far beyond Wissen's 1,000 Flowing Kills. This was not only because of Xue Wushuang's terrifying talent, but also because he had an extremely terrifying teacher. It seemed that even the Crimson Moon Palace Master was somewhat afraid of Xue Wushuang's teacher. It seems that I have to return to the Divine Palace as soon as possible and let the Palace Lord know everything. If this matter is not handled well, it will be over. Zhao Zi, he said in his heart, his expression grave. The life-death duel between Nie Tian and Xue Wushuang was not only because of the powerful figures behind them, but also because of the upcoming grand competition of the 12 Shrine. The grand competition of the 12 Divine Palaces was a major event that concerned the survival of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Zhao Zi remembered that there were only 3 months left until the grand competition of the 12 Shrine Palaces, and whether the Red Moon Divine Palace could retain its position as one of the 12 shrines depended on Nie Tian. With Nie Tian's strength, he would definitely be able to obtain the top 3 of the Heavenly Emperor rankings. In fact, Zhao Zi felt that Nie Tian was virtually invincible in the Heavenly Emperor realm. It was very normal for him to obtain the Heavenly Emperor Rankings champion. Qinlu Sha, go back and tell Xue Wushuang that I won't let him wait too long. Nie Tian glanced at Zhao Zi with a faint smile and a strange look in his eyes. The reason why he agreed to Xue Wushuang's challenge was not only because he was forced by the situation, but also because he was very confident. It had been almost half a year since he had fused with the Heart of Nothingness, and he could feel the destructive power of the Heart of Nothingness growing day by day. Therefore, the first thing Nie Tian had to do after entering the shocking god territory was to find the boundary of the first demonic fire universe. Before the power of the stars was completely awakened, only the boundary of the universe could suppress the Heart of Nothingness. As long as he could integrate the boundaries of the universe, Nyetian had the confidence to advance to the immortal state. He already had the spirit-bright power in his body. It was just that he couldn't fuse it together, so he couldn't condense his godhood. If the universe's boundary isn't in a planar world, then it must be in a territory. I just don't know if it's in the God awakening territory. Nyetian muttered to himself. He could only pray that the universe's boundary was in the God awakening territory. In the past few months, Nyetian had looked through a large number of ancient books, but he did not find any information about the universe's boundary. Furthermore, he had obtained a few other devil fire diagrams from the Dan Emperor, but he did not find any trace of the universe's boundary. This undoubtedly meant that the boundary of the universe was not in the divine realm of the heaven realm, but in the realms. Actually, after Nyetian had fused with the heart of nothingness, his perception of demonic fire had become very strong, especially towards the boundaries of the universe. The boundary of the universe and the heart of nothingness were born together, so there was a natural connection between the two. Nyetian, you're too arrogant. Since you've met Shui Wushuang, there's only one ending for you, death. The 1,000 flowing killers looked cold at Nyetian. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he uttered the last word, die. Then, he turned around and left. Mr. Nyetian, the matter with the 9 monarchs has come to an end. I will be leaving now. I hope you can enter the God realm as soon as possible. I will be waiting for you at the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Zhao Zi took a step forward and said, as for Shui Wushuang, you don't have to worry about it. I will report this to the palace lord, and he will deal with it personally. Mr. Zhao, thank you for your kindness. Nyetian smiled faintly and said, let me handle the matter between me and Shui Wushuang myself. I hope no one else will interfere. Zhao Zi was stunned. He did not expect Nyetian to say such a thing. One arrogant kid. Vincent finally could not help but speak. Even I don't dare to provoke Shui Wushuang, yet you want to have a life-and-death battle with her? You're courting death. Humph. Nyetian glanced at Vincent and sneered. Who do you think you are? You're just a mad dog that bites anyone you see. You might be afraid of Shui Wushuang, but I'm not. You. Vincent was rendered speechless by Nyetian's words. His face immediately flushed, and he was speechless for a while. Let me give you a piece of advice. It's better to be sensible. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died. Nyetian glanced at Vincent and ignored him. Zhao Zi glared at Vincent and signaled him to stop talking. Zhao Zi did not say anything else and immediately left with Vincent. Nyetian sent Zhao Zi and the others off, then returned to the hall. Frowning, Li stepped forward and asked, Teacher, when do you plan to go to the realmverse? I will go to the realm after I'm done with the matters in the plane world. It will be at least half a month, or at most a month. Nyetian nodded and said, you can cultivate in the divine realm of the heaven realm for now. I will let you enter the realm soon. Li Yi and the others nodded and did not speak anymore. Nyetian would leave soon. They would probably be cultivating in seclusion at that time. Zhao Zi left the heavenly essence God pill behind. It would take at least a few months to completely digest the divine pill. Next, Nyetian chatted with everyone for a while and then dismissed them to return to their own places to cultivate. After a while, Nyetian came to a small courtyard. Brother Nyetian, you're here. Nie Yuro forced a smile when she saw Nyetian, but her face could not hide her worry. Nyetian nodded and saw Ni Zichen walking over. He asked, Miss Zichen, is Ni Jiaming still not awake? Ni Zichen shook her head and said with a puzzled look, Jiaming's aura is obviously normal, but he just can't wake up. It's too strange. Nyetian frowned. He was also puzzled. It had been 3 days since Ni Jiaming fell into a coma. He had been in a coma. During this period, Nyetian came over a few times. He did not pay much attention to it, but now he felt that it was strange. I'll go take a look at Ni Jiaming, Nyetian said, and then entered the room. Ni Jiaming laid on the bed. He had regained his calmness and was very gentle. There was even a smile at the corner of his mouth. It was as though he was a person who was in a deep sleep and had a beautiful dream. Nyetian took a step forward and closed his eyes. The holographic divine glyphs revolved, and he carefully sensed everything in Ni Jiaming's body. After a while, Niet Tian's forehead was covered in sweat and his face was pale. But strangely, he did not sense anything unusual. Ni Jiaming's condition was no different from a normal person, but he was still unconscious. So strange. Niet Tian frowned, and his face became strange. Niet Xiao, come and take a look. Niet Tian shook his head. He had a thought and decided to let Niet Xiao take a look. But strangely, Niet Xiao did not respond. Niet Xiao. Niet Tian shouted again, but there was still no response. Niet Xiao was obviously in the three-life stone. There was no reason for him to not hear Niet Tian's words. Niet Tian frowned. He suddenly thought of something. His heart sank, and he exclaimed, "Could something have happened to Cher?" Niet Xiao had always been protecting Cher. It was the crucial moment of Cher's awakening, and she could wake up at any time. Niet Tian, are you all right? Ni Zichen saw that Niet Tian's expression was strange and asked. I'm fine, Niet Tian said anxiously. He stepped out into the courtyard and took out the three-life stone. Chapter 1359. In the courtyard, Niet Tian looked at the stone of 3 lives in front of him and was stunned. Ni Zichun and Yeyuro walked out and were also stunned. The stone of 3 lives was 10 meters wide and as red as blood. There were blood-colored runes surging on it and circulating in the air. But that was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that the stone of 3 lives was constantly releasing surging sword chi. It was like a mountain or an ocean that spread in all directions. The endless sword chi was like a huge wave that rushed into the sky. The sky was filled with sword shadows, like stars in the sky, flickering incessantly. It was extremely dazzling. The brilliance of the swords shot through the space of 10,000 meters, and the entire heaven and earth seemed to have become a sea of swords. There was a terrifying sword chi everywhere. What a terrifying sword chi! Niet Tian slightly reacted and felt the terrifying sword chi around him. His eyes trembled violently and even became a little dazed. He could not believe what he was seeing. He had seen many sword intents, but he had never seen such a vast sword intent like the one in front of him before. Even when he walked the path of sealed swords, the Ink Jade Dragon Sword's chi was not so vast. The stone of 3 lives seemed to contain an ocean of sword chi, and it was constantly releasing terrifying sword chi to the outside world. At this time, the others also felt that something was wrong and rushed over. Teacher, what's going on? Chengju walked over and saw the stone of 3 lives. She was extremely surprised and could not help but ask. Niet Tian shook his head. He did not know what was going on either. After a while, Li Yi, Tang Hao, and the others appeared. Boss, where did this red stone come from? Jean de Bayo walked over. His brows furrowed as he asked with a shocked expression. Niet Tian shook his head. He was worried about Cher and Niet Xiao's safety and did not say anything. I want to enter the stone of 3 lives to take a look. Niet Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He moved and wanted to enter the stone of 3 lives. But in the next moment, a shocking scene appeared. When Niet Tian's figure was a few meters away from the stone of 3 lives, a powerful sword chi barrier appeared. An enormous force appeared, covering the sky and earth, and it was impossible to dodge. Punk! A muffled sound rang out, and Niet Tian's silhouette paused for a moment before he was sent flying. He fell to the ground with a pale face and a mouthful of blood. This! Niet Tian was taken aback by the sudden turn of events, and his face stiffened. He couldn't enter the stone of 3 lives. On the 3 lives stone, there was Niet Tian's soul imprint. This was something that belonged to him. How could he not be able to enter? Niet Tian was aghast and could not react for a long time. The others also looked at Niet Tian in a daze, not knowing what had happened. After a long while, Niet Tian finally calmed down and let out a long breath. Since he cannot enter the 3 life stone, then Niet Xiao definitely cannot come out as well. No wonder when I called out to him, there was no response. At this time, the sword chi outside the stone of 3 lives became even more intense. The surrounding sword chi was so dense that it was almost liquefied. Waves of terrifying sword chi soared into the sky, as though it was trying to break free from the shackles of heaven and earth. Disher Tion, what's going on? Nye Tion became much colder as he roared in his heart. Disher Tion's figure appeared, but his face was slightly solemn as he said, "The physique of 3 lives is about to awaken." "What do you mean?" Nye Tion frowned, and his face was filled with shock. He knew that Cher was about to awaken, but why couldn't he enter the stone of 3 lives? The meridians of 3 lives is not any weaker than the physique of a saint. When her spiritual physique awakens, it directly erases your soul imprint. Disher Tion said with a complicated expression, "The meridians of 3 lives has fused with Wan Jian's inheritance." This seat also does not know what will happen next. Nye Tion's eyes trembled violently as he probed with his divine sense. As expected, he realized that the soul imprint he left on the stone of 3 lives was already very weak and was about to disappear. Nye Tion's thoughts moved as he wanted to leave another soul imprint on the stone of 3 lives, but he realized that his divine sense was directly bounced back. There seemed to be a layer of terrifying sword chi barrier outside the stone of 3 lives, which was able to block all external powers. Disher Tion, you said that Cher's meridians of 3 lives has fused with Wan Jian's inheritance. What does this mean? Nye Tion's heart was in a mess. He was worried about Cher and Nye Chio, and he asked in a low voice. The stone of 3 lives contained Wan Jian's inheritance, which came from an ancient God Realm swordsman. Nye Tion knew about this, and he had personally seen Cher absorb Wan Jian's inheritance. He originally thought that Cher would wake up soon and nothing would happen, but he did not expect that the current situation would occur. I don't know either. Disher Tion's expression was very complicated as he said, "If the meridians of 3 lives completely fuse with Wan Jian's inheritance, there is a possibility that Wan Jian's bloodline will be born." Wan Jian's bloodline. Hearing these words, Nye Tion frowned again. He did not really understand what Wan Jian's bloodline meant, but he was very clear about the word bloodline. Disher Tion's meaning seemed to be that after Cher awakens, she would directly produce the power of bloodline. The power of bloodline. This was a power that only a powerful martial artist could produce. By fusing their own power into the bloodline, it would be passed down from generation to generation. Cher had just awakened, but she could already produce the power of bloodline. This was too terrifying. Nye Tion, the power of bloodline that I'm talking about is not as simple as you think. Disher Tion seemed to know what Nye Tion was thinking and smiled strangely, appearing somewhat sinister. "What do you mean?" Nye Tion bellowed. "Don't be anxious. You will know when you continue watching." Disher Tion laughed bitterly. Then his figure disappeared. No matter how Nye Tion shouted, he did not appear again. Damn it! Nye Tion cursed in his heart, but he had no other choice and could only watch quietly. At this moment, Nye Tion could only wait outside. He did not know what was happening inside, and his face was covered with beads of sweat. Actually, he was not too worried about Cher, but he was worried that Nye Chio would be in danger. The sword intent outside the meridians of 3 lives became more and more intense, faintly condensing into a gigantic sword that connected the heaven and earth, as though it wanted to split the heaven and earth. "Boss, your friend seems to still be inside the red stone." At this time, Jean de Bayo came to Nye Tion's side and suddenly said, "In." Nye Tion frowned and was stunned on the spot. He looked at Jean de Bayo with a strange expression. After being stunned for a few seconds, Nye Tion then reacted and exclaimed, "You can see the scene inside the meridians of 3 lives stone?" Jean de Bayo nodded his head in astonishment. He thought that the meridians of 3 lives stone was transparent and others could see everything inside too. "Quickly tell me what's happening inside." Nye Tion immediately reacted and cried out excitedly. Outside the meridians of 3 live stone was a layer of sword intent barrier, blocking all powers. Nye Tion could not sense what was happening inside. But Jean de Bayo had the 3,000 fiend god seals and could actually sense everything inside the meridians of 3 live stone. The current Jean de Bayo already reached 3rd level Heavenly Emperor strength under Nietion's help. The 3,000 fiend god seals within his body were already all awakened. His perception abilities were even stronger than Nietion's. Chapter 1360. Jean de Bayo held a ball of light in his hand, and images started to appear in the ball of light. At the start, it was very blurry, but it gradually became clearer until it became very clear. Nietion looked at the image in the ball of light, and his gaze turned gloomy. Inside the ball of light, Cher stood in the sky, her entire body filled with a vast sword intent. The sword intent around her surged and churned, as though her entire body was condensed from pure sword intent. At the side, Nietzsche looked on in astonishment, but he was not injured. Seeing this scene clearly, Nietion let out a long breath, and his expression became much more relaxed. I wonder what will happen next. Nietion frowned and thought to himself. At the same time, inside the 3 life stone, Cher was still unconscious. Her figure stood tall in the sky. The sword intent around her surged, and the entire 3 life stone seemed to be filled with sword intent. But inside her body, there was a shocking change. Endless sword intent was like a raging wave crashing into her body. The 3 life meridian continued to absorb the sword intent, and its form gradually changed. The 3 life meridian was similar to an ordinary yuan meridian, but it was stronger, and its aura was more vast, especially the life energy. It was surging. The 3 life meridian had runes surging on it. It was extremely strange. When the 3 life meridian was first created, Nietion could feel that its aura was terrifying, even stronger than the Supreme Dragon Meridian. Its life energy was comparable to the 10th Yuan Meridian in Nietion's body, the Star Origin Stone. At that moment, the 3 life meridian's form had a shocking change. It became extremely sharp, like a sharp sword. As the 3 life meridian absorbed more sword intent, its form became even more similar to a sharp sword. Old Man Sword said that when Lady Cher awakens, I have to inject this seal into her body. If not, something terrible will happen. At that moment, Nietzsche frowned as he looked at Cher and muttered to himself. He did not have the time to tell Nietion about this matter. Whether or not he should inject the seal into Cher's body made him hesitate. At that time, before the Sword Elder left, he had told Nietzsche a few things and left the seal in his body, so that when Cher awakens, he could inject the seal into Cher's body. Nietzsche realized that he was unable to leave the 3 life stone and could not explain to Nietion, causing him to hesitate whether or not he should inject the seal into Cher's body. That damn old man Sword, he did not explain much and only told me to do it. Nietzsche muttered to himself, if I do not do as he says, and something terrible happens to Lady Schwer, that will be bad. But if I really insert the seal into Lady Schwer's body and something happens to her, Master will skin me alive. Saying that, Nietzsche frowned even more and scolded the Sword Elder in his heart. After hesitating for half a day, Nietzsche finally made a decision and said, Old Man Sword, you better not harm me. With that, Nietzsche's figure flashed. He leapt into the sky and looked at Cher with a passionate gaze. He then slapped down with his palm, and a seal shot out like a ray of light, directly entering Cher's body. After Cher absorbed the seal, there was no reaction at all. It was as if the seal was directly submerged in the sword will and did not have any effect. Outside the Stone of 3 Lives, Nietion saw Nietzsche's actions and frowned. He did not understand. Of course, he did not suspect that Nietzsche would harm Cher, but felt that it was strange. The Sword Elder must have left something for Nietzsche. Nietzsche thought for a moment and immediately understood. In the following period of time, the sword intent outside the 3 Lives stone continued to condense and did not dissipate. Meanwhile, Cher continued to fuse Wanjian legacy with the 3 Lives meridians. After half a day, the situation was still the same. Cher has not woken up yet. Nietzsche was getting impatient. His expression was tensed up, causing him to feel uncomfortable. The others also watched quietly, not even daring to breathe loudly. Just at that moment, Cher, who was inside the three live stone, finally made a move. Bang! High up in the sky inside the three live stone, Cher's body trembled. A terrifying sword will soared into the sky, straight into the nine heavens. The massive sword will immediately condensed and formed a gigantic sword image, like a gigantic flood dragon. It soared into the sky. At the same time, the three live stone suddenly trembled intensely. It became extremely unstable, as though it was about to crumble. Everyone retreat. Nietion sensed that something was amiss. He shouted out and signaled for everyone to retreat. Everyone felt that the sword will in the surrounding space had suddenly become berserk. Their faces immediately became shocked, and they all retreated. Jean de Bayo suddenly froze, sensing that something was amiss, and cried out, "Boss! Oh no, this stone doesn't seem to be able to hold on anymore. It's going to explode." And yet Tion similarly sensed it, and it was even more intense. He sensed that the sword will in his body became restless, the blood and chi in his body surging nonstop. It was as if his sword will lost control and was going to tear his body apart. "My sword spirit." Right at this time, a cry suddenly sounded out, panicking to the extreme. Nietion abruptly turned his head back and saw that it was actually Duanmu Lu. A black, enormous sword appeared behind him. It was precisely his sword spirit, Eight Extremities Kunwu. Duanmu Lu currently already had 5th level Heavenly Emperor strength, but he actually could not control his sword spirit all of a sudden. This was too bizarre. But in the next instant, several more people's sword spirits automatically flew out, rushing towards the horizon. "What's going on here?" Everyone cried out in unison, completely unaware of what was happening. "You guys quickly look at the sky." Suddenly, someone shouted, full of panic. Nietion's brows furrowed, and he raised his head to look at the sky. The scene that entered his eyes made him suck in a breath of cold air, his entire person stunned. High up in the sky, there were actually many sword spirits floating around, suffusing the entire stretch of sky. The entire sky became a world of sword spirits. Amen. Nietion immediately reacted to it. It seemed like the sword will inside the three live stone was too massive, arousing the sword will in the swordsman's body to go berserk and go out of control. Hence, the sword spirits all automatically flew out. Although Nietion was a swordsman, he was not a sword spirit martial artist. Hence, the effect of the sword will on him was not very great. Is this the Wan Jian bloodline that Sakura talked about? Nietion raised his head and looked at the vast sword spirits high up in the sky, his brows knitted tightly. It seemed like he had indeed thought too simply of the Wan Jian bloodline. This was a kind of power that was far stronger than bloodline. When it was awakened, it directly made all the swordsmen's sword spirits lose control. It was really terrifying. At this moment, the sword spirits high up in the sky suddenly began to let out a sword cry, which resounded through the entire sky. In an instant, heaven and earth shook and the wind and clouds roared. Everyone's expression was extremely shocked, and they looked at everything in front of them in disbelief. Suddenly, Jean de Bayo seemed to have sensed something and shouted in panic, "Boss, the red stone can't hold on any longer. It's going to explode." Nietion's eyes trembled violently, and he suddenly turned around to look at the three live stone. That stone was actually very violent, and it was shaking violently as if it was going to explode at any time. Oh no! Seeing this scene, Nietion's heart suddenly sank. He also did not know what kind of power was contained in the three live stone. If it exploded here, the consequences would be unimaginable. He was afraid that the entire divine cold city would be razed to the ground, or at least create another demonic devouring abyss.